happens if the remains belong to one of the suspected victims of Rodrigo Duterte's war on drugs. Dr. Fortune goes through the contents of the body bag with painstaking care. What was she looking for, we asked. Evidence, she said. She wanted to find the real cause of death, not the one given on the death certificate, which, in the case of drug war victims, was often something medical, like heart failure. Dr. Fortune said that sometimes when inspecting those apparently unsuspicious deaths, she'd pulled a bullet from the body bag or found the hole the bullet had made. This is the evidence she was after. Evidence that, as she told us back in 2023, she one day hoped to show to a prosecutor at the International Criminal Court. That same year, we went to the Philippines Department of Justice to ask questions about the war on drugs and specifically about the Philippines' non-cooperation at that time with the International Court. The Philippines argued then that the ICC had no business interfering in its own domestic judicial process. By chance, we had a meeting last week with the very same official at the Department of Justice. We'd been told beforehand that on no account were we to mention Duterte. There'd been a lot of speculation on social media, and the presence of camera teams outside the DOJ building only increased our interest. Our interview ended and microphones switched off. Our interviewee volunteered that he was having a busy day. I asked him if he had anything to tell us. Nothing, he said. There's nothing to say. Less than 24 hours later, and Rodrigo Duterte was back on Filipino soil. My colleague sadly didn't get his shot at the airport window of Duterte returning to face justice. In fact, Duterte didn't stay in the Philippines for long. The 79-year-old was packed into a private jet bound for The Hague that same day.
Tim Mansell there. That's all for this edition. I'm Pascal Harter. The producer was Polly Hope. And we'll be back again next weekend here on the BBC World Service.
That was the BBC programme from our own correspondent.
Good morning, Manitoba, and hello there, Winnipeg. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio, and we are live downtown in our CBC studios. Well, off we go. April 28th, Canadians will head to the polls. We have 14 ridings across Manitoba, and we're going to hear more from Heather Wells about already what early analysis is shaping up to look like. So that's coming up in news headlines in a moment. But first, let's just say our good morning, shall we? I hope you had a great weekend. Here we are on Monday. Show is Information Radio. Morning show's on until 8:37. If you have a problem between now and then on the drive, you're going to be calling Chloe Friesen, who's covering the commute and directing the show. Good morning, Chloe. Also behind the controls in our control room, May McKillop is teching for Abby today. Good morning, May. And I'm going to be covering what's happening in our weather forecast. Before I get to that, let's say hello to Kev. Kevin Nipatebo is behind the controls of YouTube. Kev's our streaming producer, so you might be watching us this morning. All right, to the weather here. Mainly sunny, a high of 3 degrees. We'll get some melting after a chilly yesterday and some snow skiff down across Winnipeg. And then in Brandon, mix of sun and cloud for you today. Your high is 1 degree, so you'll crack 0. And in Thompson, few flurries beginning this morning, and your high is exactly 0. Speaking of Heather Wells, now let's go and find out what she is working on in our news center. Probably no surprise what your lead's going to be, Hev.
Yeah, good morning. The federal election is kicking off, and polls suggest the Manitoba Liberals could hold on to their existing seats and even present a challenge in seats held by the NDP, whose support has plummeted. We're going to hear more about this probe research poll conducted on behalf of the Winnipeg Free Press coming up. As well, experts say anti-Semitic graffiti in a Winnipeg terrorism-related case is on the lighter side of what MKY is known for. MKY were the initials that were sprayed on some buildings in Charleswood. The Evan Bellegarde at the Canadian Anti-Hate Network says it is a violent neo-Nazi hate group. We'll hear more in our next local news coming up at 6:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
We actually did on the morning show a really comprehensive interview about that group and the risks and where they are present, and also online, what to watch for with your kids. And at one point they were talking about how they were recruiting through gaming and such. So serious story. All right. Let's get to what's happening in the national and international scene, because World Report is up next. It's 1 minute to 6 right now.
Today on Q.
The new play from the award-winning Canadian actor and playwright Anushree Roy follows 9 women and girls through one night during the partition of India in 1947. Anushree will tell you about how her own family stories shaped this play and what the history books often leave out.
Survival stories are every day, ordinary people surviving extraordinary events.
Q with Tom Power. This morning at 10:30 in Newfoundland. And on CBC Listen or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. It is election season, Canada. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh boarding a bus for Montreal yesterday evening. His pitch to voters: the NDP fought for pharmacare, dental care, and they will fight for Canada too. Bloc Québécois leader Yves-François Blanchet is warning people in his province it is a bad idea to vote based on what they believe the U.S. will do.
I believe that in any instance, under any circumstance, one should never vote because of fear.
Green Party co-leader Jonathan Pedneau is starting his campaign in Montreal, while Liberal leader Mark Carney is campaigning in Newfoundland. He began his campaign there yesterday, and he criticized the Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, who is making an aggressive play for Liberal votes. As Tom Perry reports, Carney also got an earful from protesting fish harvesters.
Our majority government prime minister to come, Mark Carney.
Day one of the campaign, and Liberals like Fisheries Minister Joanne Thompson are sounding confident. The party has seen a remarkable turnaround since Justin Trudeau stepped down, Mark Carney took over, and Donald Trump started talking about making Canada America's 51st state.
Who is ready to stand up for Canada with me?
In his first rally of the campaign, Liberal leader Mark Carney spoke repeatedly about the threat to Canada coming from the U.S.
They want our country. Never. They can't have it.
Carney took aim as well at Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, a man he calls the worst person at the worst time. But as Carney delivered his speech, police were keeping a close eye on dozens of crab fishers protesting outside.
When we heard that the Prime Minister was going to be here, then we felt we had no other choice but to bring our message here.
Dwan Street of the Fish Food and Allied Workers Union says protesters are angry about cuts to snow crab quotas and want change. Carney acknowledged the protesters in his address and says he's ready to listen.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you.
Carney and the Liberals hopeful their newfound confidence can carry on and not fade over the course of the campaign. Tom Perry, CBC News, St. John's.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is trying to make inroads in the Greater Toronto area. The region supported the Liberals in past elections, but as Kate McKenna reports, Poilievre's rally there last night was packed.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre's campaign kickoff included a rally in North York, packed to the brim with eager voters.
Look at these incredible, hardworking, patriotic people. With people like these, we can overcome any obstacle. We can bring home the country we knew and love. We can stand up to the Americans and put Canada first.
The line to enter the rally extended outside and snaked around the venue. Party staff couldn't let everyone in. The room hit maximum capacity. Some people were turned away and given free T-shirts.
Well, we'll see. Maybe some folks will leave.
Barrie resident Stan Ronan stood outside hoping to get a glimpse of Poilievre. He says he supports the Conservatives because he believes Poilievre will bring down the cost of living and tighten immigration controls.
It's been 9 years of nightmare and upheaval. On all fronts, and this is the fella that will reinstate the Canada we know and love.
The rally was held in the Toronto area. The region has been a bastion of Liberal support, but Conservatives want to make gains. They found success last year when they turned a red Toronto seat blue in a by-election for the first time in 30 years. Poilievre will be in Brampton today, hoping to keep the momentum going. Kate McKenna, CBC News, Toronto.
The first black Republican woman to be elected to the U.S. Congress has died. Mia Love, the daughter of Haitian immigrants, entered politics in 2003 as a city councilor in Saratoga Springs, Utah. She later became mayor. In 2014, she would win a House seat and make history. She later lost her seat to a Democrat in 2018. Love had been outspoken about her battle with brain cancer. She died yesterday at the age of 49. U.S. negotiators are meeting with Russian officials today in Saudi Arabia. They are trying to reach an agreement on a partial ceasefire in Ukraine. Ukrainian and U.S. officials met yesterday in Riyadh. The talks are being described as constructive, but Ukrainian MP Alexander Merzhenko told the BBC he is not so optimistic.
Everything depends on Putin, and he's not interested in ceasefire or peace, and he is a major hurdle on the way to ceasefire. Ukraine has agreed unconditionally to Mr. Trump's ceasefire proposal. Russia, Putin has rejected it, and that's why I don't have high expectations.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says this latest meeting between U.S. and Ukrainian negotiators was more technical. They are looking at details like off-limit targets, including energy infrastructure. Police in India are investigating a popular comedian for defamation after he did some biting political stand-up. That is Kunal Kumar taunting the second highest elected leader of Maharashtra state. Eknath Shinde is a close ally of the Indian Prime Minister. His party complained after the comedian posted that skit mocking him on Instagram. And party workers ransacked the comedy club where it was performed. The chief of the state is demanding Kumar apologize. South Korea's acting prime minister has been reinstated. A constitutional court has overturned the impeachment of Han Duck-soo. This is the latest twist in South Korea's ongoing political disorder. The country is still waiting for a separate court ruling on the impeachment of President Yoon Suk-yeol. Yoon was impeached over his imposition of martial law in December. Freelance reporter Frank Smith has more from Seoul.
Judges for South Korea's Constitutional Court ruled 7-1 against the impeachment motion of Prime Minister Han Duck-soo in Seoul. They ruled the accusations against him were neither illegal nor serious enough to warrant his removal from office. Following the ruling, Han thanked the court for what he described as a wise decision. We all share the same wish for the country to develop and prosper, he says. Han assumed the role of acting president in December following an impeachment vote against President Yoon Suk-yeol. But he was later impeached himself after he was accused of delaying the ruling on Yoon by refusing to appoint judges to the Constitutional Court. A verdict on President Yoon's impeachment is expected later this week. Hundreds of thousands took to the streets of Seoul over the weekend, frustrated over the dragged-out case. Today's verdict may give the president's supporters hope he might also be reinstated. Meanwhile, Han has vowed to safeguard South Korea against a global trade war. The country is bracing for potential effects of threatened tariffs by U.S. President Donald Trump, but must overcome political turmoil at home first. Frank Smith for CBC News, Seoul.
The Canadian Chamber of Commerce puts St. John, New Brunswick at the top of the list as the most tariff-vulnerable city in the country. Their report looks at the risk and impact U.S. tariffs may have on St. John's biggest sectors, including oil. The CBC's Kayla Hansel breaks down what makes this city so vulnerable.
On the production line is Cracked Canoe beer from Moosehead Breweries, the largest and oldest independent brewery in Canada.
Welcome to our brew house.
Chief Financial Officer Patrick Oland says Moosehead exports 20% of its beer to the U.S., but an even bigger concern, tariffs on aluminum. His company buys 100 million cans a year.
So once the tariffs went into place, the price of aluminum jumped by about 15%.
St. John sends 96.3% of its exports to the U.S., largely forestry products, seafood, and oil, home to the largest oil refinery in the country. Irving Oil can process more than 320,000 barrels of crude a day, with the vast majority exported south of the border. And that's the biggest reason the Canadian Chamber of Commerce has determined St. John is more tariff vulnerable than any other Canadian city.
It's interesting times, as they say.
Mayor Donna Reardon says being a tariff hotspot is informing how she's thinking about the federal election.
I'm watching for strategies I'm watching for leadership. I want to know that there is a concrete vision.
And while there's been a focus on diversifying, industry experts say there aren't necessarily readily available alternatives for energy products, leaving those in this most vulnerable city still wondering what comes next as the trade war rages on. Kayla Hounsell, CBC News, St. John.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime at cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Well, here we are on Monday morning, everyone. Officially day one on the campaign trail. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Thanks for joining us on Information Radio, 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and YouTube. Today's high is going to be 3 degrees. Lots of sunshine in Winnipeg. We'll dig through some more details in your forecast in a moment. You're already up thinking election and writing to us on my Facebook page. We'll share some of those comments as well this half hour. We've asked, what do you care about most heading into this federal election, and what keeps you up at night? So we're going to hear some of those comments. Canadians vote on April 28th. More analysis of that coming up this hour. Also, how do you help your kids make sense of the relentless news cycle right now? We are going to talk to a parenting writer and author, Bear Bergman. And what do you do if they come home and they have made sense of the news in a way that you don't? How do you have that discussion in your own family? And what does that look like to encourage your children to find their own way, but also to understand what your family individual values might be? So really interesting parenting column coming up this hour on Information Radio, so we hope you can tune in. Plus, I want to mention one more thing. The latest in our series of stories by the student filmmakers of the CREATE program over at Sisler. We have that coming up as well for you, so stay tuned. Right now, let's go to Heather Wells for those Manitoba headlines at 6:11. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, polls suggest Manitoba Liberals could hold on to their existing seats in this election and even present a challenge in seats held by the NDP, whose support has plummeted. A Probe research poll conducted on behalf of the Winnipeg Free Press says support for the NDP in Manitoba is in the 9% range, while Liberal support has rocketed up to 44% in this province. We're going to look at one Winnipeg riding in particular, Winnipeg Centre, coming up. As well, the Canada-U.S. trade war is pushing the brakes on a Winnipeg retiree's dream car. Pat Fletcher bought a 1968 Dodge Charger from a U.S. broker, but when he tried to bring it across the border on March 15th, he was charged $46,000 in tariffs, and the dream car is still a dream. We'll hear more in our next local news coming up at 6:30.
He's on our show this morning for an interview, so hopefully he's gotten past the worst shock of that before he talks to us more about it. Wow, eh? All right, thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Let's get into the weather forecast. I'm covering because Abby's off. It's -8 in Winnipeg right now. In Thompson, it's -10 as you start your day. Over in Brandon, it's misty and -11. Sure was cold here in Winnipeg yesterday. Kind of had that snow and the gray start to the day, but then the sun came out in the evening, and the spring sunshine. We're going to have a lot of that today in Winnipeg. Mainly sunny. Our high is 3 degrees. Into tonight, increasing cloud again, low -6, and then tomorrow it should clear once again with a high of 6 degrees above zero. Briefly, because it's our first kick at the forecast on air here, let's have a look at what's going on over in Brandon. In Brandon today, mix of sun and cloud for you. Your high is going to be 1 degree, and then up in Dauphin, you're expecting a high of 3 degrees today, and you're going to have a mix of sun and cloud. And finally, in Thompson, a few flurries for you in that part of northern Manitoba. That'll begin early this morning, and your high is 0. Chloe Friesen's filling in for Corey Funk today. Good morning, Chloe.
Good morning. Looking at the commute, not too bad out there. It is early, so as you are making your way wherever you're going on this Monday, we would love to hear from you if you spot something either slowing you down, out of the ordinary, or just something you think your fellow commuters should know about. You can call us at 204-788-3093.
Well, I don't know about you, but it feels sometimes like a decade's worth of events has already been packed into the first few months of 2025. Conflicts overseas, the trade war with our closest neighbor, questions about our Canadian sovereignty, and now an election. An adult can find this overwhelming. Kids are likely, though, to be hearing and reading much of this as well, of course. Now, Bear Bergman is our parenting columnist, a father of 3 and author of Special Topics in Being a Parent, a queer and tender guide to things I've learned about parenting mostly the hard way. I spoke to him about how he navigates the news with his kids last week.
Good morning.
So what's the value of listening or watching the news with your kids, especially right now?
You know, at the moment, among other things, there's just a lot of news, and people are talking about it everywhere. And one of the things that means for families is that our kids are hearing bits and pieces of the news, but we don't really know what they're hearing, and we don't really know how they're making sense of it. So one thing that we get when we make a choice to listen to or watch the news with our kids is now we know what they're thinking about and talking about. And you know, we're encouraging them to feel curious about it and to ask questions about it. And I'll be honest with you, especially these days, I don't always know the answers to their questions when they're asking things about the news, which also means there's a great opportunity to be learners together. When the news started being about Trump wanting to buy Greenland, I didn't know where Greenland was. We had to look for it on a map. And then we had to find out who's in charge of it. Denmark, turns out. And then we had to find out, can the United States buy a piece of land? And, you know, this kind of conversation with your kids, I think, shows them that being a learner is a lifelong process, and it really encourages them to bring their questions and their curiosity, especially when their parents or caregivers reward that curiosity with time and attention. And I think it's great for kids.
When do you decide when it is time to limit your child's news consumption or switch off for a while?
I mean, I think that we can't be on a steady diet of news all the time. The news is nerve-wracking for, I think, people of every age, especially right now. But the thing that you get when you pick a couple days a week to listen to the news is that, you know, having given it a place in your routine, I think it's easier to let go of it at other times. If your kids know Tuesday and Friday in the morning, we're going to listen to the news over breakfast and talk about it, that means Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday, you can just put on disco hits of the 1980s and take a break from it, knowing that you'll get back to it.
With all of the information online, good and bad, what approach do you take when talking to your kids about what they see when you're not monitoring them? Particularly maybe, you know, if it's something as well that you may not agree with, for example.
Yeah. You know, one of the things that you get when you are listening to the news with your kids and talking about it is you also get an opportunity for values education, which, you know, can sound sort of off-putting, but really all that is you're telling your kids how you feel about the news and why you feel that way and who you listen to when you're forming your opinion about the news. And the thing that's great about that is that after a while, you know, they will get accustomed to the idea that there's this opportunity to talk about it. A thing that the other thing that happens is that as they get older, there may come a day where they say, I disagree, or I read something different. And I will be very honest with you that what I think sometimes when that happens is you don't know. You're a child, right? I am a whole grown-up. I've seen a lot more than you. I know what's right. So you're just going to have to trust me that I am right about this. But I don't say that. What I say is, okay, make your case. And that does two things, right? One is now I get to hear about who else besides us, my child is watching or listening to as they, say whatever it is that they think that's different from what I think. And we can talk about that. Did you fact check what this person said? Do you think that they are reporting their ideas responsibly, or are they just trying to shock you and get more clicks or likes? Having this opportunity for kids to talk about how they think about something gives parents and caregivers an opportunity to talk about that with them, as well as, teaching children how to make a persuasive argument, how to decide what they think about something and then communicate it and back it up, which I'm going to be honest, that's gold in terms of preparing a kid for the world beyond childhood, as far as I'm concerned.
What do you do to help a child feel safe if they are at the point where they feel maybe, they've heard news that is upsetting to them already? So obviously an example could be how tariffs might threaten a family's livelihood. We're talking a lot about the economy and job losses. How would you handle that?
I think a thing that is true just about people is that the less control we feel like we have over a situation, the more afraid about it we are. And I think that's doubly true for children who don't necessarily have a lot of control over their world anyway. And so for me, one of the best things that we can do to help kids feel more secure about the news or whatever is happening is to talk about what you as a family, we talk about what we as a family can do about whatever is the thing that we're worried about. And, sometimes that's, you hear something on the news and you feel like this person or this group of people needs help. Okay, what can we do to help them? Can we send money? Can we raise awareness? Can we write a letter? Or maybe the uncertainty is, what will the family do in a certain situation? If families are worried about mom's going to lose her job at the auto plant, sometimes the best thing we can do for our kids is talk about, okay, what's the plan? What are the resources we have? Who can we call on? What will be available to us for the government? What will we do to make sure that we will be okay? Sometimes for kids, knowing that someone is doing something, and especially if there's something that they can do, it can really help them to feel less anxious and more secure in those difficult moments.
Thank you very much for this, Bear. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
So that's my conversation with Bear Bergman, who is one of our parenting columnists here at CBC. He is also a father of 3 and author of Special Topics in Being a Parent.
New this month on CBC Gem.
You're trending.
Fantastic.
You retweeted a white supremacist.
Retweeted a what? An author goes viral and is hit with a major plot twist. A son he never knew.
I'm on a quest to understand who I am and where I come from.
Now they're both on a journey to find themselves.
A beloved children's author getting to know his long-lost autistic son. There could be a book in it.
Could be a documentary.
The heartwarming series, Austin. Watch free on CBC Gem.
All right, let's get some calls rolling this morning, folks, shall we? 788-3205. What do you care most about heading into the federal election? What keeps you up at night? 204-788-3205. We'll get to some of your early comments online around 6:40 after our news at the bottom of the clock. Right now, though, it's time in the show for the latest in our special series of stories produced by filmmaking students over in the CREATE program at Sisler High School in collaboration with CBC Manitoba. This week, we're going to meet Winnipeg crafter Jani Messner. Now, Jani Messner is deaf. She lives with cerebral palsy and she has an intellectual disability. But with the help of an innovative organization, she has launched her own business. She creates and sells handmade crafts and cards at local markets. And now there's been a bit of a video made about her from Sisler CREATE students. The students involved with the creation of this were Venice Pesaraba, Samira Albalor, as well as Justina Finch. They produced this. Here is their story. The first person we're going to hear from is Jani Messner.
When I make my crafts, you know, I will go shopping, first I'll make a list, and I'll shop and get the things that I need, and then I'll make the crafts, and that's what makes me feel proud. Oh, I love crafting. I love making crafts. It definitely helps during tough times to make crafts. It definitely helps my self-esteem.
That's very interesting.
I was looking for something like here to put like the ornaments.
Oh, to hang from the edges of the trees?
It's so cute. It's so nice, and the cards are so nice. I save any little bit of interesting, colorful thing I can for her to see if she wants to incorporate it into her cards. It's interesting to see her thinking about like, oh, it was Father's Day. Next time we do this, we'll make Father's Day cards. And, you know, it's interesting to see her planning like that. It's just nice.
I can set up goals for myself and then figure out how to, you know, what I need to get things in place so that I can make those things happen.
She's been saving up money for, I don't know, a couple of years now to go to Hawaii and to meet a hero of hers. Because of the way her life is organized with ICOF, she can do that.
So we facilitate in company of friends, so ICOF. It's a model that allows people a lot of choice, and they direct their lives. They do all the planning, they hire their own staff. We all ensure that people are supported, having choice, really self-managing where they want to go in life and what they want to do. In ICOF, the person really just does it themselves, and we support that and really ensure that they have a voice.
Well, just before she joined ICOF, an agency in town thought that they should make the decisions for her, and because she didn't have a substitute decision maker, they manipulated her into a bad decision. She was not well treated. She lost weight. She developed an eating disorder. It was a very, very bad and painful situation. And one day when she was visiting me, she just refused to go home. And I could not I just in all good conscience couldn't send her back.
You cut them out and stamped them and then colored them and then put them on?
Those ones are stickers, actually.
Those are stickers.
Yeah, but I put them, I just made up where they went. Nice. It's important to have really good self-esteem. It's important to feel really good about yourself. You're not alone. You know, you can do things. You don't have to be stuck. And I would be happy to help anybody who needed my support.
What a lovely video that was. I encourage you to check out all the videos made by the students in the Sisler Create program in collaboration with CBC Manitoba. That was Janny Messner with the support of a ALS interpreter in the video at Mandy McDonald. Before her, we also heard from Shirley Smith, Janny's mother, as well as Patty Chiapetta with Innovative Life Options. Create students behind the video were Venice Passaraba, as well as Samira Abalor and Justina Finch, who produced this. So as I mentioned, you can check out the videos at cbc.ca/Manitoba. 6:28, Chloe Friesen's popped back in. That must mean something's going on in traffic.
We're looking at a bit of slow traffic on Northeast. Look at me trying to figure out my directions.
Pointing. I do that.
I point in the air a lot. Eastbound Broadway, just as you're approaching Main Street, it does look like traffic is getting a bit backed up there. So if you're in the area and you can let me know what you're seeing, I would love to hear from you. Or, of course, if there is something else getting in your way, perhaps you know directions better than I do. I would love to hear from you. Give us a call on the commuter line 204-788-3093.
All right. You know what? After all these years, I'm directionally challenged as well. But I know that when I lived in Steinbach and when I drove to Steinbach, because before I moved there for my work, I used to commute daily. Right. I know I would go east. And obviously I know Brandon's west. So sometimes I'll just start pointing and then I'll go, never eat shredded wheat for the whole wheel. I know, I still do that.
I still hold up my hands to figure out lefts and rights. And I you know how you hold up the L on both sides?
That I don't know because I never had a left-right issue.
If the L is correct, then that's your left side.
Look at you.
I've been thinking about getting it tattooed on me to help with driving.
I used to have a birthmark on one of my hands. That's how I knew when I was a kid, which was left and right. But now I'm old and it faded, so it doesn't help. So
you we both need tattoos.
We have business news coming up. Crystal Ramlakan, thank goodness, not Chloe or I, is going to be crunching the numbers from what it sounds like. Crystal will be in talking to us. Today's a big day for Hudson's Bay, or should I say maybe a sad day, depending on your perspective. Hudson Bay will begin liquidation of all but 6 stores across this country beginning today. That does include the 2 in Winnipeg. So Crystal will have details on that. Also, DoorDash has announced a new buy now, pay later partnership. What does that mean for food? We're going to find out. So that's all coming up in business news. If you want to weigh in on the election call, please do that at 788-3205 or on our Facebook page. We'll share some comments right after the news about what you're thinking now that we know we're going to the polls. It is now, though, right exactly 6:30, and Heather Wells is in with our cast.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:30, it is -8. We're going to see that little bit of snow that fell yesterday disappear today. A high of 3 under a mainly sunny sky. As the federal election kicks off, polls suggest the Manitoba Liberals could hold on to their existing seats and even present a challenge in seats held by the NDP, whose support has plummeted. A probe research poll conducted on behalf of the Winnipeg Free Press says support for the NDP in Manitoba is in the 9% range, while Liberal support has rocketed up to 44% in this province. Rahul Walia was acclaimed as the Liberal nominee for Winnipeg Centre in December when Liberal poll numbers were low.
The reason why I wanted to run is because this is my home riding, and I feel that I can make the biggest difference here. And so that's why I put my name to run, regardless of what the polls were saying at the time.
Winnipeg Centre has been NDP for 2 terms, held by Leah Gazan. In addition to Gazan, Green candidate Jerry Gervais is also running in Winnipeg Centre. 2 of the federal leaders enter day 2 of their campaign in Toronto, both Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, who started his campaign there yesterday, and today NDP leader Jagmeet Singh campaigns in vote-rich Toronto. Liberal leader Mark Carney makes a stop in Gander, Newfoundland, the town that came to the aid of thousands of foreign travellers when all flights were grounded after the terror attacks of September 11th, 2001. You can hear the latest on the federal election coming up on World Report at 7. A democracy advocate says Manitoba's premier broke conflict of interest laws by flying to 2 Grey Cup games on a plane chartered by the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. CBC I-Team's Caroline Bargout reports.
Manitoba's Conflict of Interest Act says an MLA must not accept travel on a non-commercial chartered or private aircraft unless it's approved by the Ethics Commissioner. Records show that did not happen when Premier Wab Kinew took his wife, son, and his assistant to the 2023 Grey Cup on a plane chartered by the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. This may not seem like a big deal, but democracy advocate Duff Conacher says it is.
Not everyone has access to that plane, and so accepting the seat on the plane for himself and others is what causes the conflict.
The Premier's spokesperson says Kinew personally paid $8,000 for the flights, but the government paid for his meals and accommodation. The Ethics Commissioner can investigate the Premier's expenses, but only if an MLA files a complaint, which the Conservatives are considering doing. Caroline Bargout, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Experts say the extremist group linked to a Winnipeg terrorism-related case is known to encourage violence. RCMP have charged a 19-year-old man for, among other things, taking part in activity of a terrorist group called MKY. Those letters, along with anti-Semitic graffiti, had been sprayed on structures around Charleswood. Evan Balgord at the Canadian Anti-Hate Network says MKY is a violent neo-Nazi organization.
They encourage members to carry out criminal acts and acts of violence. They encourage things like murder and terrorism.
Balgord says acts of vandalism are to draw attention from other members who would encourage them to do even worse things. A man and a woman are dead after their minivan crashed head-on with an SUV on a southeast Manitoba highway. It happened yesterday morning on Highway 12, just north of Zoda. RCMP say the northbound minivan was trying to pass a semi but crashed head-on with a southbound SUV. A 76-year-old man and 72-year-old woman in the minivan died at the scene. A 37-year-old man traveling with them was taken to hospital in serious condition. The 41-year-old man driving the SUV was taken to hospital in critical condition by Stars Air Ambulance. A Winnipeg retiree had to leave his car behind in North Dakota after being handed an unexpected bill. Pat Fletcher bought a 1968 Dodge Charger from a U.S. broker after saving for it for years. But when he tried to bring it to Manitoba on March 15th, he was charged $46,000 in tariffs. Fletcher couldn't pay the levy, so his car stayed in the U.S.
I haven't got that money. So what do I do? Like I'm in between a rock and a hard place. And, I don't want to put a lien against my house.
Cars made more than 25 years ago are among the list of American products tariffed by Ottawa. Fletcher now hopes those levies can be lowered soon. But if the situation drags on, he says he may have to sell his dream car. The Brandon Bobcats are making history. The underdog Brandon Bobcats men's volleyball team celebrating after winning the gold medal match, beating the University of Alberta Golden Bears 3-1. It is the Bobcats' first ever volleyball gold, and they did it on home court. Well, the Winnipeg Jets certainly had their chances.
With speed, Nikolai Ehlers shoots, scores!
Nikolai Ehlers there in the third period with a shot that just flew. Still, it wasn't enough for the Jets to win, falling to the Buffalo Sabres 5-3. After the game, Brendan Tannen.
We had our fair share of chances. Maybe hit a couple of posts where we would like the puck to go in. The goalies made some big saves, but at the end of the day, I think it's still harping on the little details, the things that we know we're good at, and we'll get back to that at practice tomorrow.
A win yesterday would have clinched a playoff spot for the Jets. The Jets now get set to host the league-leading Washington Capitals tomorrow. You can find more news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
So that Brandon Bobcats game, Heather, Chloe Friesen, who's directing this morning and also plays volleyball, so she and I often talk about the sport, but you watched all of this, so fully around the storyline Heather was talking about, and also they weren't even supposed to be in this tournament, really, or competing?
It's a Cinderella story, truly. So Brandon was set to host the U Sport Nationals, and therefore they earned a spot in the tournament because they were the host team, which is typical for these types of tournaments. And they upset every team they played.
Because they actually, if they wouldn't have been the host team, they wouldn't have qualified.
No, they were eighth seed. They were eighth seed.
That's amazing. And then they took it all.
And then they took it all and upset the number one team in the league, Winnipeg Westmen.
Yeah.
And then just continued on this incredible streak.
So good.
Winning the whole thing in front of a home crowd.
Heather was mentioning some of the details, but you were watching some of the emotion after the game, eh?
Amazing. Just tears. Tears of just happiness.
Nice. From
all of the players and the coaches especially. Oh, I was even feeling a little teary.
Hard fought. Sorry, Westman. All right. We got to shout out the other teams from our province. Yeah. All right. Let's get into what we're talking to you. Thank you, Heather. Heather's in our news center still, but she'll be back with us live before the top of the clock. Let's get into first traffic, if you're ready with that, and then we'll get into the forecast here.
Most definitely. Yeah, it looks like traffic is still picking up both eastbound and westbound on Broadway here, just around Maine. That is a busy spot during our rush hour traffic here, so it's likely going to continue to be busy throughout the morning. If you have any updates about what you're seeing, if you come across any stalls or collisions, let us know. Call our commuter line at 204-788-3093.
All right, thanks, Chloe. And now time for your regional forecast from CBC Manitoba. Abby's off, so I'm going to cover this here in Winnipeg. Let's start with a mainly sunny sky, shall we? We're going to stay there all day. We might have a few fog patches this morning in the city, so be careful of that if you're commuting. A high of 3 degrees. Into tonight, increasing cloud, low -6. Tomorrow, clearing, a high of 6 degrees. And then it looks like we're going to stay above 0 as well for Wednesday, where we have a high of 8 degrees with a mix of sun and clouds. So more melting this week. Over in Brandon, mix of sun and cloud for you today. And right now, you're misty and -11 degrees. In Winnipeg, by the way, it's -8. But Brandon's misty -11. For you, your high in Brandon's going to be 1 degree today. Again, you have fog patches that are possible today. Into tonight, chance of light snow overnight, a 30% chance, the low down to -5. And then tomorrow, cloudy, a 30% chance of light snow in the morning and a high of 2 degrees. And finally, up in Thompson, current condition is mostly cloudy and -10. You'll stay cloudy today, few flurries this morning, a high of 0. And then tonight, those flurries should end, and then partly cloudy overnight with a low of -14. Into tomorrow, though, some snow expected. Mix of sun and cloud, cloudy in the afternoon, and then the snow in a high of 3 degrees. And there's no cumulative amount mentioned here for Thompson, which usually is good news and just means bit of spring snow. It is now 21 minutes to 7 o'clock. It's time for business news with Crystal Lee Ramlakan. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Marcy.
So let's talk about the Bay. 2 stores in Winnipeg are on the list of liquidation. All across the country, actually. It's going to be every Bay store that gets liquidated except 6 stores. They're in Quebec and Ontario, I understand. What do customers need to know about the process, which begins today?
Yeah, so the company has 80 stores under the Hudson's Bay banner, and like you were saying, all but 6 stores are being saved. So yeah, the flagship one in Toronto, and then one in the city's Yorkdale Mall, and then another at Hillcrest Mall in Richmond Hill, Ontario, and then the other 3 in the Montreal area. So the company was able to pull some of its stores out of liquidation because sales have actually been so high since its creditor protection case began earlier this month. However, if the company doesn't find a long-term solution, the 6 locations could eventually be liquidated as well. And if the company secures additional financing, it may be able to save more stores. So the retailer intends to wrap up liquidation by June 15th. And the thing that I think that a lot of people are wondering about is the discounts, right? What are they going to be like? Well, the Hudson's Bay hasn't really said much about that, but you may remember when Nordstrom left Canada in 2023. I know there isn't one there in Winnipeg, but in other places across the country, those liquidation sales began at just 5 and 10% off, surprising some shoppers. Now, those discounts grew steeper as time went on, but much of the merchandise was sold early on, leaving a limited selection of items behind. And the Bay will stop accepting gift cards after April 6th. So if you have some of those, you probably want to use them ASAP. And the loyalty program has also been paused while the creditor protection process continues. And, more than 8.2 million Canadian customers hold about $58.5 million in unused points.
Let's go to another story. DoorDash has announced a buy now, pay later partnership. What are the details here?
Yeah, so the online delivery service says the arrangement with the financial tech service Klarna will allow customers to defer payments on orders such as takeout from restaurants, makeup, and electronics. So customers will be able to pay in 4 interest-free payments. And while some experts say buy now, pay later loans can be manageable for many people, they say these types of loans should be used selectively and that customers should be aware of when their payments are actually due, and they should ensure that they have the money to pay the loans back, or else they may incur extra fees. So research has shown that buy now, pay later loans are more often used by people who are already in debt. And these loans could cause problems for people who have many loans and who use them to finance reoccurring expenses such as food. And, after the announcement, concerns spread online that people would use payment deferral for food delivery purchases that can be only $10 or $20. In response to that, though, Klarna said in a blog post that the option to pay in 4 installments would only be available for purchases over $35. And the company also said that it would be better for a person to pay, say, $200 for groceries in interest-free installments than with a credit card, which could result in fees and interest. And, Klarna is based in Stockholm, and it is preparing for an initial public offering. And it already works with other food delivery companies, including Instacart and Uber Eats.
And finally, mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all? Crystal Lee is, of course. She's here to tell us about Disney's live-action version of Snow White. Opened over the weekend. How'd it do?
Yeah, well, you know what? The debut wasn't much of a fairy tale. The big budget retelling of the classic film opened to a sleepy $43 million at the domestic box office amid a slew of controversies. So early industry estimates predicted Snow White, which cost around $270 million to make, would take in $48 to $58 million in its first weekend, but it didn't do that. Despite falling short of expectations, though, Snow White did surpass Captain America: Brave New World, which only brought in $4.1 million. And industry analysts say it could see steady growth in the weeks ahead. And though the remake of the 1937 classic topped the box office, it fell short in comparison to, say, the live action of Cinderella, which was released about a decade ago. So the controversy-free Cinderella grossed about $92 million in its opening weekend against a $138 million budget, so less than Snow White. And, Snow White has found itself in the crosshairs of a culture war over the casting of Rachel Zegler, who is an American actor but of Colombian descent, as well as the casting of Gal Gadot, who had a mandated service in the Israeli army.
How are the markets looking today?
So in Europe, markets are opening higher. Germany is up, the UK is down, France is down. In Asia, markets are mixed. Shanghai is up, Hong Kong is up, Japan is down. Oil is up 54 cents to 68.82 US per barrel. Gold is up 370 to $3,027.10 US per ounce. And the dollar is up a tenth of a cent to 69.8 cents US.
All right, thanks a lot, Crystal Lee. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
All right, thanks, Marcy.
Crystal Lee Round-McCann with our business news. All right, Manitoba, here we go. April 28th is Election Day. We have 14 ridings across our province. 8 of them are mostly in Winnipeg or entirely in Winnipeg. The others are rural. We've been hearing on the news where things look like they could change, are likely to not change. We're asking you about the issues, though. What do you care about most heading into this federal election? What keeps you up at night? So here's some early comments already coming in since I posted this right around 6 o'clock this morning. Abe Clausen saying constant deficits year after year and no trying to cut costs anywhere and just adding more national debt. So Abe's concerned about the debt. Writing also nothing to show for it, longer waiting in hospitals, highways and roads have not improved, and housing and food is way too expensive. Kev Roberts saying it is the housing markets that worries him as well. People new to the housing market. I worry for young people and newcomers. I'm wondering how they find affordable housing. Judy Herskovich writing in, her issues are Canadians living with disabilities who are dependent on income assistance. They're still under the poverty line. PJ Burek writing in, I worry about Canadian MAGA coming over to power and taking away environmental protections and creating more privatization in healthcare. So clearly his worried about some version of a party that might be of that thinking coming into power. Lloyd Romaniak writing in, I'm worried about our relations with the Americans. And finally, Brenda Beck saying this morning, I'm worried about women's rights, grocery prices. And Robert Dreger finally saying the biggest concern facing Canada is, of course, the USA. And then he goes on to elaborate. So that's just a taste. Someone's also typing right now. So join the conversation online on my Facebook page. That's Marcy Marcusa. And during the show, it acts as a show page. Or you can call us, 788-3205. Well, let's hear from some of the people who would be leader of this country now that we are 5 weeks away from going to the polls. Sunday, political leaders move to galvanize supporters, as you've been hearing, and lay out their party platforms. First, in his speech, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre said his party would represent change in Ottawa.
Desperate for a fourth term, Liberals have replaced Justin Trudeau with his economic advisor and hand-picked successor, Mark Carney. But a Liberal is a Liberal is a Liberal. It's the same old Liberal MPs, the same Liberal ministers, the same Liberal advisors, the same Liberal elites, the same broken Liberal promises of the last 10 years. We cannot afford another lost Liberal decade. We need to put Canada first for a change, with a new Conservative government to axe taxes, reward work, unleash entrepreneurs, harvest our resources, make things here, build homes for our youth, secure our borders, rebuild our military, honor our history, and raise our flag. It starts with a big bring it home tax cut on work, investment, energy, and home building. We'll lower taxes to bring home businesses and to make sure Canadians bring home more of their paychecks. And that starts with axing the carbon tax, the entire tax, a tax that the Liberals, with Carney's enthusiastic support, brought in for 7 years and increased over and over. A tax that is still in law, despite the government hiding it from gas stations for the 30 days leading up to the election. A tax they will bring back bigger than ever before if re-elected. And on this point, Mr. Carney and Mr. Trump are in total agreement. They both want to tax Canadian industry. Mr. Carney's carbon tax and Donald Trump's tariffs will destroy Canadian industry, pushing jobs south. But I won't let that happen. A new Conservative government will repeal the carbon tax law, and we will axe the tax for everyone, for everything, for good, forever, and for real.
That's Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre speaking in Gatineau, Quebec on Sunday. So meantime, the Liberals are seeking their fourth consecutive mandate, this time, of course, with their new leader, Mark Carney. The CBC's Ashley Burke spoke to Carney also on Sunday yesterday and asked how Canadians should believe the Liberals can represent change. Have a listen.
You're a new leader, but the Liberal government has been in power for a decade. Your minister served under the Trudeau government. Why should Canadians believe that when you say that you represent something different and change?
Well, I have several things. The first is that you've seen a change in approach and action. It's not words, but action. So the changes to the tax regime that I've mentioned, the changes to our approach to housing, you'll see much more in the coming week in terms of increasing dramatically the supply of housing. Change to the approach to our external trading partners and our security partnerships with the accords with France, with the United Kingdom, the building out with the European Union. Changes to the coverage of healthcare in this economy. So all of those steps, the scale of ambition and change in creating one Canadian economy. And I think one of the things that I would emphasize is that I recognize, and my government recognizes, the need to act dramatically and act rapidly to build an economy that's strong for Canada, to control what we can control, to build for us and by us. That's what we're doing. The other thing I would add is that we have some very strong members of our caucus of ministers. I'm fortunate to serve with them. We are recruiting some exceptionally strong candidates across this country. Some have been announced. Many more will be announced in the coming days. This is a renewed government, and the proof is in the action, and the action has been considerable.
Liberal leader Mark Carney speaking with reporters outside Rideau Hall in Ottawa yesterday. So Laurie Turnbull's here for some analysis. She's a professor of political science at Dalhousie University. Good morning.
Good morning.
So short campaign, no big surprise. We just heard from Poilievre and from Carney about what they're, outlining as their some of their promises and platforms. What do you think Mark Carney's biggest challenge is going to be?
Well, he's not a politician, but I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing for him. I think ultimately probably a good thing, in that he's coming to this with this kind of really unusual set of credentials and experiences. It's hard to imagine somebody kind of more suited for the moment. But it's also a skill to be a politician. It's a skill, and a hard one, to be able to package your messages in a way that really connect with people, that travel through the country, that bring people together and, get people excited. And I think, it's not that he can't do that. It's just that this hasn't been his career. So we shall see. And also, I think right now the Conservatives and the Liberals are tied. It's not like, Carney, the momentum behind Carney is considerable when you think about where the Liberals were just a couple of months ago. But he hasn't won this thing yet, right? Like, it's going to be a competition.
Let's get to Pierre Poilievre. His first election as Conservative leader, but he's run in many federal elections as an MP. He's the opposite of Carney with a lot of political experience. Just looking at that. What will he say to convince people to vote Conservative, especially because they've had to shift their messaging due to what has been going on down south and the Liberal changes?
I think Poilievre is going to spend a lot of time trying to bring Carney's stock down and make people not trust him. So he'll keep poking at Carney's financial holdings. Is he keeping a secret? That kind of thing. And I think Poilievre will keep going with a lot of the messaging that they have been going on in terms of building the homes and acting the tax and all that. I think he does use those sort of slogans as a way of getting through to people quickly. And I think, Poilievre for a long time was making a lot of progress on these issues that people are concerned about with respect to affordability. And the fact that Carney is on the scene doesn't mean that Poilievre doesn't still connect with people. It's just going to be a question of who people want to be the leader as we go through this uncertain time. But I think, Poilievre seems to me have the Conservative base behind him, so he'll keep pushing.
I should ask, people might be wondering, where Mark Carney is running. He's running for a seat in an Ottawa riding. This is a safe bet for the Liberals. I'm guessing they're not going to put him in somewhere where he's, going to be challenged much.
Well, that's it. There was all this speculation about where Carney would run, and some people were saying Edmonton. And I thought, oh, God, right? Now is not the time to run the leader in some long shot Liberal riding that they're going to have to work their butts off to try to get it. He's running in Nepean, which is west of downtown Ottawa. And this was a riding that was held by Chandra Arya, who was trying to be a contender for the leader, and they didn't greenlight him. And so now they wouldn't greenlight him at the candidate level either. And so now this is going to be where Mark Carney runs. I think it makes a lot of sense. It's a pretty Liberal-friendly place. It's even in the recent Ontario election, a Liberal won there. And for Carney, his time is going to be so important. The centrality of the Ottawa riding means he can go door knocking for 2 hours and then still make it to the GTA to spend most of the day, kind of thing. So I think it lets him kind of travel more easily. So I think this is probably a good call.
I want to ask about the NDP. NDP trailing the Conservatives and the Liberals in the polls. What, if anything, can NDP leader Jagmeet Singh do you think, to improve their fortunes?
I think this is going to be a very difficult election for the NDP, to be honest. I don't know what they can do about that at this point. They can try to hold on to what they've got in British Columbia, which is going to be very hard. They can target some key ridings that tend to swing in and around the GTA. I think they probably will pick up a seat or two in Atlantic Canada, but ultimately this is going to be an election about who is going to be the Prime Minister, who is going to lead the country in a very uncertain time. And because the NDP trails so much, Jagmeet Singh is not really in contention for that position. So I think it's going to be hard for them.
Lori, thanks for the analysis. Appreciate your time.
Anytime. Thanks for having me.
So Lori Turnbull with us, Professor of Political Science at Dalhousie University. We reached her in Ottawa. More analysis coming up on World Report in a few minutes here for national and international news. Now in Manitoba, I'll just reiterate here, we have 14 ridings. 8 of them are entirely or mostly in Winnipeg. The others are Brandon Souris, Churchill, Keewatin Nook, Aski, as well as Portage Lisgar, and Riding Mountain, Selkirk, Interlake, Eastman, and Provencher in the southeast. These are huge areas of Manitoba representing a lot of you. And so always the federal election challenge is to try to get around the whole province and try to hear from you and what you're thinking. If you have a story that you think that we should cover from your riding that you really are hoping will be an issue for politicians that want your vote, let us know at CBC 788-3205 as we continue to plan our coverage over this very fast election period and how we're going to get all around the province. We'll have some details on that in the days ahead. Right now, let's go to Heather Wells. She's in our news center with developing news this morning. Hi there.
Good morning. Yes, and on day 2 of this campaign, polls are suggesting the NDP faces the biggest challenge in Manitoba. National polls suggest NDP support, as you've heard, has plummeted, while a probe research poll conducted on behalf of the Winnipeg Free Press placed the party's support in this province in the 9% range. Probe partner Mary Agnes Welch says it poses a challenge for all 3 Manitoba NDP incumbents. We'll hear more. And the Canada-U.S. trade war is pushing the brakes on a Winnipeg retiree's dream car. Pat Fletcher bought a 1968 Dodge Charger from a U.S. broker, but when he tried to bring it across the border, he was charged $46,000 in tariffs. We'll hear what happened next in our next local news coming up at 7:30.
Thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
-8 this Monday morning in Winnipeg. The sky is clear. It's going to stay that way, mainly sunshine for the day. You could see a few fog patches this morning, so be careful if you do. A high of 3 degrees today in Winnipeg. If you need us on the commute, call Chloe at 788-3093. In the next hour of the show, we're going to talk to that man who still has his car stuck in the States. In addition, at 7:40, politicians, celebrities, business owners, influencers, and almost everyone else in our country has told the Americans what they think about how their leaders are treating Canada. But many faith groups have chosen to remain silent. We're going to get some insight on that as we launch a faith column today on CBC. So we're going to have the details on that at 7:40. Also at 10 to 8 this morning, a democracy advocate says that Manitoba's premier broke conflict of interest laws by flying to 2 Grey Cup games on a plane chartered by the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Some say this is a bigger deal than it might sound. The I-Team's Caroline Bargout is going to walk us through what we know. Stay here. World Report's next.
Today on The Current. We're in an election that looks really almost too close to call.
I'm Mark Kelly, and we're off. After much anticipation, the federal election period is finally here, and Canadians have big choices ahead. Our national affairs panel is here to talk through where we stand. That's coming up on The Current.
The Current, this morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Canada's political leaders want your votes, and some of them are offering a tax cut in exchange for your support. Party leaders are out on the campaign trail. They are targeting what could be some challenging ridings, and they're coming with promises to make voters richer. Let's go to Janice McGregor in our Parliamentary Bureau. And Janice, what are some of these party leaders promising?
Marcia, for months, the Conservatives have been trying to frame this election as a choice. Which party is going to make life more affordable? Pierre Poilievre's team has already rolled out on social media this morning a major policy plank to grab headlines on this, a personal income tax cut to the lowest tax bracket, changing it from 15 down to 12.75%. The math the Conservatives are spinning on this is that this is going to be a tax cut for the average wage earner in Canada of about 15%. Someone making $57,000 a year is going to save about $900. Poilievre's on offense this morning, trying to pick up seats in Brampton and Mississauga, ridings that have been tough for Conservatives in the last 2 campaigns. He previewed how tax cuts lie at the heart of his campaign in front of a packed house last night in North York.
It starts with a big, patriotic, bold and beautiful bring it home tax cut for all Canadians.
Now, Liberal leader Mark Carney's early swing through Atlantic Canada is taking him to Gander this morning. Last night in St. John's, he talked about the course correction that Liberals made on carbon pricing in a region that was particularly angry about the carbon tax because there aren't great alternatives there to fossil fuels.
We, on our first day, eliminated the tax on carbon for people, for small businesses, and for farmers. And we did that to end the division it was creating.
At his launch yesterday, Carney also promised to cut the bottom tax bracket, but a smaller cut, one that had a specific intent, making up for the loss of the carbon rebates that are going to be paying out for the last time in a few weeks.
Where are the other party leaders campaigning today?
Jagmeet Singh is starting in Montreal with a housing announcement. That's a city where New Democrats are trying to sound hopeful for a couple of seats. We'll see as the campaign goes on, though, how much the NDP prioritizes its slimmer chances in Quebec compared to more winnable seats, like the one he's driving down the 401 to reach this evening in Toronto. Meanwhile, the Bloc's official campaign launches today in Quebec City. All 4 leaders out roughly at the same time this morning, competing for our attention.
Thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.
Janice McGregor reporting from Ottawa. It is unusual for Canadian sovereignty and national security to be an election issue, but that is what is happening now as U.S. President Donald Trump keeps threatening to annex Canada. As Murray Brewster reports, defense spending is expected to be a key issue on the campaign trail.
This is the time for Canadians to rise to the seriousness of the moment.
Goldie Hyder, president of the Business Council of Canada.
But even more importantly, it's the time for our political discourse to rise to the seriousness of this moment.
Hyder has never been known as a defense hawk, but the Business Council has been growing more strident, even issuing a report last fall calling for Canada to spend 3% of its GDP on defense in the coming years. Canada is struggling to hit the current NATO benchmark of 2%. Hyder says all parties should realize this election is different.
Well, we've never been where we are. Therefore, it is existential because what's at stake? Your very sovereignty is being challenged.
In past elections, when defense matters did get debated, they were political wedge issues, arguments over whether to buy specific pieces of equipment like fighter jets and helicopters. Defense analyst Dave Perry says given the poor state of the military, each of the parties needs to resist the temptation to blame and shame, and they need to come to the table with specific plans on how to solve the equipment crisis quickly.
I am not sure that we can go back to trusting the United States the same way that we have, or if we should. And in the absence of that, we're going to need to figure out how much we can do ourselves.
One of the issues that will be hard to avoid politicizing, the Liberal proposal to limit the number of U.S.-made F-35 fighters and possibly buy the rest of the fleet from Europe. Marie Brewster, CBC News, Ottawa.
The United Nations AIDS Agency says there could be 2,000 new HIV infections globally every day due to USAID cuts. The agency says no other government or group has stepped up to fill the gap left by the U.S. cuts, and that could mean 6.3 million more AIDS-related deaths over the next 4 years. Russian and U.S. negotiators are meeting in Saudi Arabia to discuss a proposed ceasefire in Ukraine. Both Russia and Ukraine agreed in principle to a limited ceasefire last week. Neither country has been able to agree to exact terms or a timeline. Today's meeting follows a meeting with U.S. and Ukrainian officials in Riyadh. The CBC's Briar Stewart has more.
The talks in Saudi Arabia are focused on a partial ceasefire, one that would see both sides commit to halt attacks on energy infrastructure and in the Black Sea. The negotiations come after a phone call last week between U.S. President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin.
I think you'll see a lot more progress get announced after Monday.
U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff insists the Russian leader is interested in peace, despite the fact that Putin rejected a proposal for a 30-day unconditional ceasefire.
There are grievances on both sides. Our job is to narrow the issues, bring the parties together, and stop the killing.
In an interview with right-wing media personality Tucker Carlson last week, Witkoff said he didn't regard Putin as a bad guy. The U.S. envoy also appeared to struggle to name the 4 Ukrainian territories that Russia has annexed since it launched its full-scale invasion.
We do not trust Putin. We do not trust Russia. And
Kira Rudik is a Ukrainian member of parliament and says despite the talks between Trump and Putin, Russia continues to hit energy sites and civilian infrastructure.
Even if Russia says they are ready to do the ceasefire, how would you enforce it? And what would happen if they break their part of the deal?
Last night, Ukraine said Russia launched nearly 100 drones at sites across the country. The Air Force said it shot down just over half of them. Briar Stewart, CBC News, London.
A Turkish media workers' union says authorities have arrested at least 8 journalists. The reporters and photographers were covering escalating protests in Turkey. Tens of thousands of people took to the streets when the mayor of Istanbul was imprisoned yesterday. Ekrem İmamoğlu is a top rival to Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. İmamoğlu was jailed on corruption charges. In Istanbul, this construction worker says he believes support for İmamoğlu will only increase. He says the mayor's imprisonment is an injustice. Authorities have not commented on the arrest of the journalists. The union is calling it an attack on press freedom and the people's right to learn the truth. Federal election campaigns are off and running, and so are the political ads. Party leaders are using all forms of media to make their pitches to Canadians, as Yvette Brent reports. They're even showing up beside celebrities and influencers.
What are the 2 seasons in Toronto?
Winter and construction.
Wow.
We really are Canadian.
It only took this ad featuring Liberal leader Mark Carney and comedian Mike Myers a day to reach 10 million views. UBC political scientist Stuart Press says the Liberal message is clear.
It's all invoking this idea that this is Team Canada.
It didn't appeal to Conservative voter Al Schlegel.
It's important to me, but it's not genuine.
But it's a common theme. Pierre Poilievre's slogan is Canada First, and his wife voices some of his ads.
His children know him in Francais, Espanol, and English as Papa.
Prest says it's all part of Poilievre building his image.
So introducing himself and his family is a kind of a first family vibe, if you like, to show that this is a family like any other.
NDP leader Jagmeet Singh jumped into a TikTok trend in this video viewed by 4 million people.
I retie my turban at least once a day.
Political strategist Harneet Singh of EOK Consults in Kitchener says the leader is appealing to new voters.
They believe they can bring in the first-time voters into their fold, which is going to help that party grow.
Part of a cross-party trend to meet voters where they are, wherever they gather, online. Yvette Brand, CBC News, Vancouver.
Canada's oldest company will begin liquidating most of its stores this morning. Hudson's Bay says all but 6 of its locations will be selling off their inventory. The stores omitted from liquidation right now are in Ontario and Quebec, including the flagship store in downtown Toronto and the location in downtown Montreal. Hudson's Bay filed for creditor protection earlier this month that says it is facing financial strain because of lower spending, reduced traffic in downtown cores, and trade tensions with the U.S. The company will wrap up liquidation by June 15. And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime, cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Monday morning, Manitoba. Hopefully had a good weekend. In Winnipeg, currently it is -9. That's where we're sitting at Information Radio in our CBC studio on Portage Ave. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Thanks for being with us. So this hour on the show, we're going to talk tariffs in a different way than we have before, because we're going to hear from a Winnipeg man who is sharing his story. And it's a story that raises a lot of concerns, but it also could be something that could happen to you. A purchase made stateside could soon cost this Winnipeg man nearly $50,000 in tariffs. He bought a car, and it's not in Canada yet because he says he can't afford $46,000 extra. We're going to hear more about what happened with him. Also, this hour on the program, Manitoba's premier is being accused of breaking conflict of interest laws. After CBC News learned he flew to the Grey Cup on planes chartered by the Blue Bombers, the I-Team's Caroline Bargout is going to talk us through what we know. So that's coming up at 10 to 8. Right now, Heather Wells is in with other developing stories. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, as the federal election kicks off, polls suggest the Manitoba Liberals could hold on to their existing seats and even present a challenge in seats held by the NDP, whose support has plummeted. It's a probe research poll conducted on behalf of the Winnipeg Free Press. We're going to hear more about it coming up. And a woman is recovering in hospital after being run over in a Winnipeg rec center parking lot. Winnipeg police say it happened over a dispute over a parking spot on Saturday afternoon on St. James and Wellington. I'll be back with more on that as well in our next local news coming up at 7:30.
All right, thanks, Heather. You're welcome. Let's get into the weather here. Mostly cloudy in Winnipeg. It's -9 right now. Up in Thompson, mostly cloudy and -11. And in Brandon, it is misty this morning, and it's also -11. But the maps all look blue. Visually, when you see that, it's usually better news than when we have that magenta pink color on the map. That means snow's coming. But it looks like we're going to have a pretty decent spring day here. In Winnipeg, mainly sunny, a high of 3 degrees. Could have some early morning fog, though we haven't heard of any problems so far, I don't believe. Tonight, increasing cloud, the low down to -6, and tomorrow will be above 6. Just for over to Brandon, really briefly, you're expecting also sun and cloud today, your high 1, and up in Thompson, few flurries for you today, your high's right around 0. Chloe Friesen is in to talk about what's happening with our commute.
Good morning. Still looking at some maps here. Broadway, eastbound, westbound, looking fairly slow this morning, so that might slow down your morning commute. Other than that, no major issues that we are aware of. So if you do spot something, a stall, a collision, or just something you think your fellow commuter should be aware of this Monday morning, let us know by calling the commuter line at 204-788-3093.
Well, 77-year-old Pat Fletcher loves classic cars. He said he always dreamed of owning a 1968 Dodge Charger RT, and he found the vintage car in Texas. And so he said he knew he had to go and get it. But now he wants to share his buyer beware story because something happened to him that he hopes isn't happening to anyone else. As I mentioned, his dream quickly turned into a nightmare when he tried to bring this car home. Border agents slapped him with more than $46,000 in retaliatory tariffs and other taxes. And he joins us this morning to walk us through what happened. Good morning to you.
Hi.
So tell me about this car first, Pat, before we get to what happened to you at the border. Why is this the dream car and the one you found? Like, what color was it? Tell me a bit about that.
Well, the reason I went after it, I've been chasing it since Christmas time with this company trying to get, and I got the price down on it because they originally wanted $120,000. So I got them down to 98, so I was happy with that. And I've been searching for a long time because I had, when I was a teenager, I bought a 68 Charger, same thing, and so I always kind of in the background. I've been into collector cars all my life. I've done this so many times that, you kind of use it as a stepping stone. You find one, you fix it up, and then you sell it for a profit. Then you find a better one, and, same thing, because cars have been in my blood all my life,
Yeah.
all kinds of them. And I've always kind of wanted to get that Charger back from you. I think it's like a lot of guys, it's like car guys and car girls, they're after they're really want to relive their childhood,
Yeah, you're going to sit in that 68 Charger and you're going to feel like you're a teenager again.
Yeah,
or whatever
exactly,
age you
you know.
were. Yeah. How
But I
rare
mean-
how rare is the car? You said you've been searching since December, but how rare is a 68 Charger to find in the condition that you found this one in?
Well, it is the 68 is the one to try and find, but the trouble is most of them are over 200,000 US. Like there's some of them are 250 is crazy. It just because that's kind of an iconic year because it was used for all the movie cars. It was a 68, like the Bullet movie and all that, and it's just like a cult following on these cars, and nobody will get rid of them. They just keep on. There's a lot of people just would never sell them. Man.
So you go, you get the car, you got the price you wanted. Obviously, this is a big investment for you.
Yeah.
So you try to bring your purchased car into Canada, and where's the first point where you realize, this can be more expensive?
Oh, well, first of all, before I left, Texas, I made sure, I called the finance department and said, "Is there any tariffs or anything?" All she said to me was, "You're good to go. Just the tariffs are going to come on soon, so get your car home." And so, anyways, it was a short conversation. I didn't, get any paperwork or write her down or name or anything. It was just a casual call in. So he come along, and then that damn hurricane was going through the south, east USA, the tornadoes and all that. So he had to stop for a couple of days and then go. And so I was about 3-4 days behind the crossing point. So it was on the 10th when I actually purchased the car and left, and ended up being the 16th by I ended up there. But
March 16th, you're crossing the border? Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And what do they say to you at the border? Like, are you actually at the little window? Like, or with a purchase like that, are you
exactly.
you're at the window. Okay.
So I'm at the window. Well, first of all, my daughter Crystal, she's a nurse at Concordia Hospital, so she's in day surgery, so she's got an important job, and she came along to help me load it because I'm kind of impaired on the right hand, So, and a friend of Rob's, so there's the three of us, and we get the car already. We're paperwork all in line, and like a broker, had done it, and it's all perfect in line. So we pulled up there, and they said to us, "Can you pull over to the side?" So we pulled over to the side, and we come inside. We sat down, and they were taking about a half an hour, and they're all talking to each other, looking through all these books and manuals, and it's like they didn't know what was going on. And then they finally come up to me and showed me a piece of paper with $46,636.49.
Which, by the way, is 50% of what you paid for the car. I just want to point that out as people are following percentages. Okay. And what was your reaction to that? And
well,
what?
I was I don't know how to describe it. I thought it was a joke. Actually, my daughter and I thought they were kidding, And then when we realized their service is serious, I started to get nauseous and shake, and I went and threw up in the bathroom. My daughter took over talking to them, so I couldn't even talk to them,
Oh,
and
Pat,
it was terrible.
I'm so sorry. So you have this huge financial shock. You're sitting there.
Yeah.
How did they explain what this amount of money owed
Well,
was about?
it was all the tariffs, and then I saw because they were, all the border guards, Canada and U.S. were so good. They were on my side completely. They wanted me to get that car home. I had to get to my pills because it was supposed to be just like an hour-long drive each way. Pick up your car and it just turned out to be a nightmare. And so they said, he did say, like, you don't have to do this, but I would advise you to take your car back to the American side, and find a place to, you probably have to
Store it or park it or figure this out. So we heard in the news.
Find a place to sleep. So I said, I said to my daughter, you and Rob go back to Winnipeg because you got very important jobs and everything, and I'll take care of this. And she was arguing with me. She said, Dad, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to sleep in my car, I guess. So that's what I did. I parked on the gas station lot and on the American side, and there was a blizzard going on too, and I was just freaking because my car had snow all over it. It's like it's never seen snow. It's been in Texas all its life, and probably in shock.
So we heard on the news that after all of this turmoil, to say the least, for you and your family, obviously then you're in the States a little longer. Your car is still in the States. Where is it? Where is it right now?
It's at Mike's Postal.
It's in the States. It's in North Dakota. Is that right?
Yeah. And okay. I went over there as soon as it turned 9 o'clock, and I was like wet and freezing and everything. And I drove over in my car. I went inside, and Jackson is the owner, I guess, and I met him. And I asked him, do you have storage for cars I can leave, because I have to get back to Winnipeg.
So it's a rental place in North Dakota. So you're now paying for it to stay there, I'm guessing.
Well, you know what he said? He was just unbelievable. He says, sure, we can, rent you a spot out around back. And like, he says, and then he came outside. He said, oh, he looked at the car and said, no, this isn't going outside. It's going to my house. He says, I have a 2-car garage heated. Lots of room. He says, I'm going to put this car in my house. And I felt so good. I was relieved my car. I could, so it's at his place right now.
Piece of good news.
Oh, he's super, super nice guy. So then I went home, man.
I don't want to run out of time to ask you some critical questions. So I guess the first one is, what will you do now? And then I want to ask you what your message is to other Winnipeggers who are thinking of shopping down south about what maybe you would suggest that they do.
Right now, I'm just waiting for these stupid tariffs to drop. I just can't believe they can't get along, the 3 countries. They shouldn't have put I think they should have, with the tariffs. I know Trump's an idiot and all that, Trump isn't. They don't hurt the classic cars. They don't charge them anything, any kind of charge. So they recognize that it's just a part-time toy thing. In the summertime, you drive, and even
so
Autopack is good to us. They give us cheaper insurance.
So you're waiting for the tariffs. So hopefully,
I'm kind of waiting for them to come down.
This is not something you can get a refund on. By the way,
no,
right? It's not like you're going back. So what is your message to other people who are listening to your story this morning?
That's why I wanted this on here. I've been on TV too, and I said, well, get it. Be careful. This could happen to you. And since that, I've had about 12 people call me all over Canada in the same position, and 2 of the people were they had their plane tickets booked to go get their car in the States, and they just freaked. They phoned me and they said, can you keep us, keep a watch for it and all that. And so there's more than just me. It's it's a big thing, cargo. So it's I got it out there, and I stopped some of them anyway, to get in the same. So I just want everybody to don't have what happened to me. It's a nightmare.
I'm so sorry this happened to you. Thank you for sharing your story, and let us know, if something changes in your situation. Appreciate it, Pat.
Yeah, I'll tell the world. If I get my car back home here, I got a garage empty, sitting waiting.
You take care, Pat. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Winnipegger Pat Fletcher. Now, CBC did reach out, by the way, to the Canadian Border Services Agency. A spokesperson confirmed that vintage vehicles are subject to the tariff. In a statement, it says, quote, based on the information available, a 1968 Dodge Charger may qualify for a tariff item, which is subject to the surtax. The surtax is payable only once. In other words, the importer would pay a 25% total surtax. So something doesn't quite add up with the math in Pat's case. I think he was being charged more. But the statement goes on to say, quote, it is important to note that when importing goods to Canada, both GST and PST or HST, depending on the province, that's obviously outside of Manitoba, will also be charged as required, end quote. So if you had any problems with tariffs already affecting your purchases, should you have some coming from down south, let us know, 788-3205.
Whether it's breaking news from around the world, across the country, or in your own hometown, it's all at your fingertips on the CBC News app. Get the top stories from where you live under the local tab, or watch video clips, live events, and the national on your smartphone or tablet. Get all the news you want, when you want it, where you want it, with the CBC News app. Download the app for free today.
1942, Europe. Soldiers find a boy surviving alone in the woods. They make him a member of Hitler's army. But what no one would know for decades, he was Jewish. Could a story so unbelievable be true? I'm Dan Goldberg, and from CBC's Personally, Toy Soldier.
Available now on CBC Listen or wherever you get your podcasts.
It is 7:25 a.m. on 89.3 FM, 9:90 a.m. on the app and on YouTube. And in Winnipeg, it is mostly cloudy. It is a high of -9. -9 is our current condition. A high today of 3 degrees, so we're going to crack zero. And that's going to be what happens in Brandon as well, where you're looking for a high of just 1 degree, but you'll get over zero today. Welcome to Monday, March 24th. We're nearing the end of the month, right? Just crazy here. And also we're getting close to spring break, which is very cool. Let's talk about school right now, because we have a really good school sports story that we want to start with. And if you're in Brandon, you might still hear the cheering, or maybe you stayed up to watch the game. I'm talking about the Bobcats' big win. Why don't we start there, Scott Regehr, because it's just this lovely local story. If you don't mind giving us a couple lines of what happened with the volleyball team. Yeah,
University of Brandon men's team winning 3-1 over the powerhouse at the University of Alberta yesterday. This is the first national title for the Bobcats, whose program started 20 years ago. So pretty darn cool.
No doubt. They weren't even supposed to be in this. They got in because they're hosting, but their season didn't have them in the standings where they qualified. So crazy. Yeah. Crazy. That's why I love sports, honestly. I mean, not just for the upsets, but just the storylines are so rich.
Absolutely. Yep.
So let's talk about the Jets, who, on the other side of things, were undone by a hot goalie last night, and a goalie from Manitoba.
Yeah, that's right. Arborg's James Reimer, Marcy, made 33 saves as his Buffalo Sabres topped Winnipeg. A big upset, considering the Jets are atop their conference and the Sabres are at the bottom of theirs. Winnipeg coach Scott Arniel was asked whether his team was the better one on the night.
Without a doubt. Yeah. We tripled them on scoring chances, so their goaltender was great. We haven't had one of those in a while, where we dominate like that and not come out on the right end of it, but our goaltender played really, really well.
He did indeed. Next up for the Jets, a game against the only team ahead of them in the league standings. That is the Washington Capitals. They're in town tomorrow night, also getting a chance to see Alex Ovechkin shortly before, you would think. He is going to break the all-time goals record held by Wayne Gretzky.
The latest chapter of the Canada-U.S. sports rivalry played out last night on a soccer pitch in L.A.
It did, and it was the visitors who prevailed, claiming third place in the CONCACAF Nations League. Although it was not a title match, Marcy, it definitely felt like one at times. Just before the match began, Canadian coach Jesse Marsh showed his players footage of that fight-filled start to the recent Canada-U.S. Four Nations face-off hockey game. And then they rode the emotion of having watched that footage and employed a good deal of skill as well, of course, to a 2-1 victory over the Americans. The better side throughout. Canada might have won by more had the referee called a penalty kick in their favor in the second half, and when she didn't, Marsh went, ballistic. He received a red card. He was ejected for his outburst, and defender Alistair Johnson says that all helped.
At the end of the day, it's a football match against your biggest rival, and we had to keep our emotions in check. And I think he was the one that wanted to say, like, look, I'm going to stand up for you guys. I'll be the emotional, leader. I'll be the one that needs to. If I need to blow a gasket, I will. And he did it there. And look, it fired us up. It got us through that last 30 minutes there, and got us a massive win.
The winning goal, an exquisite strike from Jonathan David, came just 5 minutes after Marsh was ejected from the game. This victory, Marcy, just Canada's third in 28 tries on American soil over the years. And given the current political climate between the countries, it was maybe its most welcome victory.
And let's keep things international before you go this morning. Canada's back atop the curling world.
Yeah, Rachel Homan, largely to credit for that, as the skip and her teammates beat Switzerland yesterday in claiming the Women's World Championship. This was Homan's second global title in a row, and just like last year, it came against Silvana Tirinzoni. Homan's respect for the Swiss skip is obvious.
An amazing team. They had control for most of the game and just got that flip there in 6. But, it's just an unbelievable feeling to be back-to-back world champions. They've done it a million times, so they know how it feels, and we're just so fortunate that we can be, in the same league as them.
Homan saying Tirinzoni's won this event a million times. Not quite, but Tirinzoni did claim the 4 world championships before Homan began her run. The Ottawa skip just the second Canadian woman after Sandra Schmirler to defend a global title. Homan's big goal now is to win the right to represent the country at the upcoming Olympics, and she'll get that chance at the Roar of the Rings November in Halifax. And a quick note about skiing, roaring down the slopes yesterday, Lindsey Vonn, who won a silver medal in the Super G at the World Cup event in Idaho, 6 years after she retired from the sport, and 6 years older than any World Cup racer has been on the podium before. Incredible story.
Crazy.
And 11 months removed from knee replacement surgery. I can't even imagine.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy. All right. Thank you very much, Scott. Appreciate it.
You bet.
That's Scott Regehr with Morning Sports. 7:25 every morning is when we hear from him here on the show. Still ahead, faith is not something we often hear on CBC Manitoba or any of our programs, faith stories, despite it being an important part of many Manitobans' lives. So we want to change that. After the news, our first conversation on air with our faith reporter. Stay tuned. Right now, your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, it is -9. It is going to be sunny today. We'll see melting. A high today of 3. As the federal election kicks off, polls suggest the new Democratic Party faces the biggest challenge in Manitoba. National polls suggest NDP support has plummeted. And a probe research poll conducted on behalf of the Winnipeg Free Press placed the party's support in this province in the 9% range. Probe partner Mary Agnes Welch says it poses a challenge for all 3 Manitoba NDP incumbents. Leah Gazan is seeking a third term as the NDP representative, the MP, for Winnipeg Centre.
Never really reflected the results in Winnipeg Centre. And really, regardless of the polls, that doesn't impact how hard I work.
Gazan faces a challenge from Liberal Rahul Walia and Gary Gervais of the Green Party. All of the country's main party leaders are going to spend today from one end of the country to the other. Liberal leader Mark Carney will be in Gander, Newfoundland today, a town made famous in 2001 when it housed thousands of grounded air passengers on 9/11. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre will spend his day in the Greater Toronto area. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh will make an announcement in Montreal this morning before making his way to an event in Toronto, while Bloc Québécois leader Yves-François Blanchet will be in Quebec City. And the Green Party's co-leaders are splitting their home ridings. They're going to be in their home ridings in Quebec and in BC. You can hear more campaign coverage on World Report at 8. Manitoba's premier has been accused of breaking conflict of interest laws. The premier and his family flew on a plane chartered by the Winnipeg Blue Bombers to the 2023 and 2024 Grey Cup Games. Manitoba's Conflict of Interest Act says an MLA must not accept travel on a non-commercial chartered or private aircraft unless it's approved by the ethics commissioner. The Premier's spokesperson says Wab Kinew paid $8,000 out of pocket for the trip, insisting he went above and beyond all requirements but would not show documentation. Wayne Iwasko is the interim leader of the Progressive Conservatives.
The Premier wants to be accountable and transparent to Manitobans. Well, here's a great time to show what's what.
The ethics commissioner can investigate the Premier's expenses, but only if an MLA files a complaint, which Iwasko says the PCs are considering. You can hear more on this story coming up on Information Radio in the next half hour. Experts say the extremist group linked to a Winnipeg terrorism-related case is known to encourage violence. RCMP have charged a 19-year-old man for, among other things, taking part in activity of a terrorist group called MKY. Now, those letters, along with anti-Semitic graffiti, had been sprayed on structures all over Charleswood. Evan Balgord at the Canadian Anti-Hate Network says MKY is a violent neo-Nazi organization.
They encourage members to carry out criminal acts and acts of violence. They encourage things like murder and terrorism.
Balgard says acts of vandalism are intended to draw attention from other members who would encourage them to do even worse things. A woman's recovering in hospital after being run over in a Winnipeg rec center parking lot. Winnipeg police say there had been a dispute over a parking spot on Saturday on St. James near Wellington. The woman in her 30s was standing in a spot, saving it for a family member. While waiting for them to drive up, an SUV tried to take the spot. After arguing, the woman in the SUV drove into the stall, knocking the victim to the ground. She became trapped under the front tires before the driver backed up and left. A 40-year-old woman is now charged with assault with a weapon and careless driving. The Canada-U.S. trade war is pushing the brakes on a Winnipeg retiree's dream car. Pat Fletcher bought a 1968 Dodge Charger from a U.S. broker, but when he tried to bring it across the border on March 15th, he was charged $46,000 in tariffs. Cars manufactured more than 25 years ago are now on the list of American products tariffed by Canada. Fletcher couldn't pay and had to leave his car behind.
It would kill me to, this car I've been after for so many years, and then I get it, and then I can't keep it. That would kill me. But, it isn't in the cards.
Fletcher hopes the federal government will eventually lower the tariffs. Until then, his car will remain parked on American soil. The Brandon Bobcats making history. The underdog Brandon Bobcats men's volleyball team celebrating after winning the gold medal match, beating University of Alberta Golden Bears 3-1. It is the Bobcats' first ever U Sports men's volleyball gold, and they did it on home court. Well, this brought fans to their feet.
Shoot! Score!
Nikolai Ehlers with a blast in the third period. It just whizzed by the head of Sabres goalie James Reimer. And even though the Jets outshot the Sabres, Winnipeg still loses 5-3. Jets coach Scott Arniel.
Get all those chances that we had, all of a sudden they just go back out the other way and it's in the net. So just we haven't had one of those in a while. Where we dominate like that and not come out on the right end of it.
A win yesterday would have clinched a playoff spot for the Jets. The Jets now get set to host the league-leading Washington Capitals tomorrow. Winnipeg 2 points behind the Caps at the top of the standings. You can find more news updated throughout the day. Just head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
I am just itching for spring to really take hold. I don't know about you, Heath.
Oh, yeah.
Like when the sun comes out and we get a bit puddly day, it's like, oh, it's going to happen tomorrow. And then yesterday happens where it's snowy in Winnipeg. All right. Yeah.
That was a bit of a downer.
And then, it's all cloudy and a downer. So I think a lot of people are itchy. I live with a golfer who is like ready to roll. We went to one of the, indoor places this weekend, and you could feel it. You could feel everybody vibrating in there. So for me, it's my yard. I keep looking at I just want to be outside. So I keep looking at my things going, maybe I could put a chair here and uncover it. And then Jean-Paul says to me, like, okay, hang on. You're getting a little ahead of yourself. But
I know, you know what? It's like that with people going to greenhouses. Like they just want to get in there and start.
I know. All right. So we're going to get a bit of a start today on some better things. Warmer than yesterday. Saturday for sure. Mainly sunny, a high of just 3 degrees in Winnipeg. This is your regional forecast now from CBC. Thank you, Heather. So a high of 3 today in Winnipeg. Increasing cloud tonight, though, back low -6. Tomorrow we'll have a high of 6 and some clearing as well. So that's what we're looking like the first couple of days to start the week here. Right now in Winnipeg, -9. Brandon's misty, -11. You're going to go to a high of 1 today, mix of sun and cloud. Into tonight, chance of light snow for you in Brandon overnight with freezing rain possible and a low of -5. So it could be a little sketchy out if you're driving tonight. Tuesday, tomorrow morning in Brandon, a 30% chance of some light snow and then a high of 2 degrees. In Thompson, today you're expecting a few flurries this morning and a high of 0 is where you're at. And the winds will be a little bit it'll be a little breezy. I won't say strong, but a little breezy. Winds will be up to 15 km per hour. And then into tonight, few flurries should end and a low of -14 overnight, but some fog patches will develop overnight. So same caution as Brandon. Be careful if you're driving around. That fog can come up suddenly. And then into tomorrow for Thompson, a mix of sun and cloud, and the cloud will win in the afternoon and snow moves into your region then in a high of 3 degrees. Currently in Thompson, mostly cloudy and as I mentioned, -11. Let's get into the morning commute all over the province. Chloe Friesen in with an update. Good morning.
Good morning. Still quiet on the commuter line. Looking at some maps here, traffic is picking up in the downtown as we enter rush hour here. Northbound Main, just around Broadway. Definitely getting busier out there. So if you're seeing anything in particular that you think your fellow commuter should know about, we would love to hear from you. 204-788-3093.
Well, up next on CBC, faith is not something that we often tackle here at CBC Manitoba, despite it being an important part of many Manitobans' lives. So we want to change that. For 22 years, John Longhurst has been the faith reporter and columnist at the Winnipeg Free Press. In fact, he's the only remaining faith reporter at a major Canadian media outlet. Recently, we asked John if he wanted to expand his column here on the radio and reporting more specifically here on the radio. And he said yes. So today's the first installment. John Longhurst joins me live in studio. Good morning.
Morning.
I'm really looking forward to this, to your reports on CBC. Tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, John, and, your role at the Winnipeg Free Press.
Well, yes, it's certainly true that I am the only faith reporter at a major media Canadian outlet. And that's been the case since 2023. And that's when Mary Hines retired at CBC Tapestry, and she wasn't replaced. But my role doing this particular project, which we call Religion in the News, as faith reporting at the Free Press, goes back to 2018. And that's when the Free Press announced it wanted to do a better job of serving communities in Winnipeg. And since I'd been the faith page columnist since 2003, I knew that the faith community here didn't feel particularly well served by the Free Press, that if religion appeared in the newspaper at all, it was probably going to be something bad. So I went to editor Paul Simin and then publisher Bob Cox, and I said I applauded their desire to serve the communities better in Winnipeg. But one community that didn't feel very well served was the faith community. And I told them if they wanted to do a better job of that, that would be something very much appreciated by them. And they said they would love to do a better job of serving the faith community and doing a better job of reporting about faith, but they didn't have any money. And I said, well, what if I go out and raise it? And that's what I did. So today, about 30 faith groups right across the religious spectrum here in Winnipeg financially support my work at the Free Press as a freelancer, reporting about faith. And about, 100, 200 individuals donate as well every year through our annual crowdfunders. And since we started in 2019, we've published over 850 news stories about faith in the Free Press. And that's on top of the over 250 columns I've written on the faith page.
Wow, so it's sustained for that long. I had no idea that there was a public element to this in terms of groups funding your work. It speaks obviously to the desire. Why, in your view, how do you articulate why faith reporting in mainstream media is important?
Well, for one reason, because there are a lot of faith stories out there, just showing from what we've been able to do at the Free Press. But secondly, it's because lots of people in Canada today are still religious or spiritual, or they believe in a higher power, or they pray or meditate or whatever. Here in Winnipeg, over 60% of people say that they're affiliated with a religious group of some kind. They may not all go to religious services. In fact, probably most of them don't. But when asked, they still say they have an affinity for some religious
Still
tradition.
identifying that somehow.
Still, yes. It's also important because it's a way of balancing the news. If religion appears in the news, it tends to be about scandal, clergy sexual abuse, or somebody in some foreign country blowing themselves up in the name of their God or something like that. But a lot of good and positive things happen because of religion, too. For example, in this community, probably up to half the food banks that serve people in this community are located in places of worship. And you can't tell the story of tackling homelessness or addictions without talking about religious groups or religious people, like Shalom Mission or things like that, which are actively addressing those issues.
850 stories is a lot. And then you also mentioned 250 columns. So I don't know how you're going to answer this, but of your stories, is there one that stands out in particular that you feel you want to sort of impart that stayed with you?
You know, that's so very, very hard to do. And you probably know that because of the many stories you've done too. But I would say that the stories that stand out for me from the work I've done, one of them certainly is the privilege, the amazing privilege I've had to interview Holocaust survivors, many of whom are deceased by now, but probably about 10 of them locally since I began doing this. And just hearing their stories of incredible survival against all those terrible odds, it's just moved me when I talked to them and when I was able to share that. But other stories that have stuck with me, telling the stories of Indigenous people who went through residential schools and somehow managed to come out with their spirits unbroken and intact and just say, wow, how did you do that? And just to hear those stories, to be able to share them with others was just an incredible privilege. And then I was able to go to Rome in 2022 with the Indigenous delegations and report about their visit to the Pope, asking him to come to Canada to apologize. And these were mainly Indigenous Catholics who were going there. And then to go to Alberta that same summer and hear that apology and travel there on a bus with Indigenous Catholics and to hear them and to hear their stories and to see what it meant to them to hear that apology. That was very, very moving.
I have to ask you about one of your more recent columns because it deals with how Canadian faith groups are reacting right now to Donald Trump's attacks on Canada, on our country, both in terms of tariffs, but also, of course, saying that he wants to annex us. So tell me what you found through your faith lens.
Well, I found almost nothing, and that was the story. When I went looking at the national websites of major faith groups in this country, I was dismayed to find zero. Nobody was saying anything about the one thing that everybody in Canada was talking about: politicians, celebrities, sports figures, you name it. It was on the minds of every Canadian. But when I went to the major faith group websites, I could find zero. It's like they didn't even acknowledge it was happening. Many faith groups sometimes complain that the media or government or society views religion as irrelevant, and they think that's a bad thing. But here was an issue everyone was talking about, and they weren't relevant. They weren't saying anything. And I thought, man, that's just not a good look for religion in this country right now.
Where does the mixing of church and state fall into this conversation, do you think?
It's an important question. And in writing about this and in talking about this morning, I'm not asking these faith groups to weigh in on politics or to say which party is right and which party is wrong. Certainly nothing like that. But I think they should acknowledge that it's happening and that their members and other Canadians are feeling anxious and afraid and uncertain about their futures. It could be as simple as posting a prayer, just asking people to pray for politicians for wisdom at this time as they negotiate and deal with Trump in the United States, or just reminding us to look out after each other at this time when we're all feeling a little uncertain about our futures. Those things would be good.
What do you hope that faith groups might do when you look at this sort of from a national perspective?
Well, the best thing, I think, I certainly hope each group does do something, and I'm happy to say that the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Canada, which has its headquarters right here in Winnipeg, did issue a statement just this week, and so that's a good sign. But at a minimum, I think they should see about getting together, if we couldn't have some sort of multi-faith response, not just Christians, not just Muslims, not just Jews, but a multi-faith response which brings people together, because this is a time for Canadians to unite. And faith groups can unite nationally and provincially over this as well, and just signal that this is important and we care and we notice.
Thank you so much for, the first report and, our little introduction, of course, at the beginning there to the listeners and to those that are viewing on YouTube. And we're really looking forward to your reporting here on CBC.
Thanks, Marcy. Appreciate it.
So that's my conversation from Friday, actually, with John Longhurst, who's a faith reporter and columnist in Winnipeg. And you can email ideas for John's column, by the way, or for his reporting, rather, to radio893@cbc.ca. It's 12 minutes now to 8 o'clock. And next... I stepped on the countdown to Boy Golden. And Boy Golden nominated for a Juno. Those will be handed out on Sunday in Vancouver. Of course, he is from Winnipeg. This tune, though, speaks to people across Canada and starts with some reflection on sliding out on an icy road.
95 into the city. 6 in the morning, must have been about -50. We hit some ice, almost died. Right about then I realized I didn't want to mess around no more. Sat down on the back porch with a buddy. I looked him in the eye. I said, baby, if you love me, when you're down low, you call on me, just say my name, and there I'll be. Yeah, when you're down low, you call on me, just say my name, there I'll be. It was written on your face, sitting in the kitchen. You were in a state, thinking about your true love, wishing you were kissing. Well, my dear friend, I'll tell you this, it's a beautiful thing to have someone to miss. Yes, it is. Woke up, read the news, and it pissed me off. I said, honey, let's go downtown. We could join the march, have a little walk. Well, I held your hand, and you held mine, and we both felt better for a short, sweet time. Yeah, despite the cops and their pipelines, we both felt better for a short, sweet time. Not thinking about much, just wondering where you are. I try to make it through the next few lines without crying. Baby, I'm trying. I guess I got my fix of the good life. I'm gonna drive out to the sticks in my old 95. I'm gonna meet you there. Good God, I swear I can't get true love just anywhere. Gonna meet you there. Good God, I swear I can't get true love just anywhere.
Boy Golden from Winnipeg, nominated for his 2024 album. It's his second full-length album, and he's nominated for Contemporary Roots Album of the Year at the Junos on Sunday. We'll see if he wins. For Eden's the name of the album. This is 3 Scenes. It's a live recording of a tune that you can find in that album if you want to check it out. Good luck to him and all the other nominees from Manitoba. 9 minutes to 8 o'clock now, and let's move to more serious matters here. As you may have heard in the news, Manitoba's premier is being accused of breaking provincial conflict of interest laws by a democracy advocate. This comes after CBC News learned he took a plane chartered by the Winnipeg Blue Bombers to the last 2 Grey Cups. The I-Team's Caroline Bargout joins us now to walk us through the details. Good morning.
Hi, good morning.
So why is it a conflict of interest for the premier to take a chartered plane to the Grey Cup?
Well, the Conflict of Interest Act specifically states, quote, a member,
they mean an MLA, must not accept travel on a non-commercial chartered or private aircraft unless they get permission from the ethics commissioner. Now, the commissioner takes into consideration whether there's other ways for the MLA to get where they're going, and if accepting the seat on that plane would cause the public to think that there was some sort of a perceived conflict of interest. Now, Premier Wab Kinew, his wife, his son, and his assistant flew on a Bombers charter to the 2023 Grey Cup. The family also took the Bombers charter to the 2024 game. Now, the Premier did not get permission from the ethics commissioner before taking either flight. Now, this might not seem like a big deal, but democracy advocates say that it is. Now, Duff Conacher is the co-founder of Democracy Watch.
Not everyone has access to that plane. And so accepting the seat on the plane for himself and others is what causes the conflict. That's the gift. If the Premier did not clear the trip beforehand with the ethics commissioner then and get permission, then it's a double violation, both not getting the approval and also accepting the gift of the exclusive seat on this private aircraft.
So in comparison, Mayor Scott Gillingham also went to the Grey Cup in 2023 and 2024. He was offered a seat on the same Bombers charter, but he turned it down and chose to fly commercial instead.
What is the Premier saying about it?
So we asked the Premier for an interview, and he declined. His spokesperson says that Wab Kinew paid $8,000 out of pocket for this trip. He paid for himself, for his wife, for his son, and then also for his assistant's flight. They insisted he went, quote, above and beyond all requirements. He paid for but they wouldn't actually provide us any kind of proof of documentation or any invoices to show that he paid for all of these flights. Now, the spokesperson for the Bombers says that the charter is organized for fans, sponsors, and families, adding that the Premier, quote, personally paid fair market value for the trip, even though we believed it wasn't necessary. Now, the Premier and his assistant billed the government for their hotel, which is totally allowed. It's not clear why they didn't also expense their flight to the government. Now, initially, the Premier's spokesperson told CBC that the government paid for Kinew's assistance flight, which they later took back and said, no, Kinew actually paid for it. They also said that the Premier paid for his own hotel, which they later corrected to say, no, the government paid for it. Then last week, the Premier's chief of staff said that the Premier paid for his own hotel, but didn't explain why disclosure documents showed that the government had reimbursed him for it. The back and forth has raised a lot of red flags for Wayne Owasco. He's the interim leader of the Manitoba Progressive Conservative Party.
That tells me that there's more to the story and there's something going on. He's hiding something. I hate to say that, but to me, the inconsistencies don't seem to be adding up.
How did we learn about this?
So CBC News filed a Freedom of Information request for the Premier and his accompanying staff's expenses. Now, we did this back in September 2024. The act says that we should have received the documents within 45 days. That didn't happen in this case. In fact, it took 170 days, and we had to file an ombudsman complaint to get the information. Now, the ombudsman had to go back and forth with the executive council and then finally had to send a letter to the government basically informing them that they were not complying with the legislation. That's when we finally got the documents that we were requesting. Duff Conacher says Manitobans deserve an apology.
He should apologize. These are very important rules. The conflict of interest law is the key safeguard beyond the criminal code provisions that prohibit bribery. The key safeguard that stops private interests from buying influence with politicians so that the politicians do favors for the private interest instead of upholding the public interest.
Just to be clear, there is no suggestion whatsoever that there is bribery here. Conacher is speaking generally to explain why conflict of interest laws are very important to follow.
Are there any consequences to breaking a conflict of interest law?
There could be. The ethics commissioner can investigate the Premier's expenses, but only if an MLA files a complaint. Now, we asked Owasco if he planned to do that. He said the PC caucus is seriously considering asking the commissioner to look into this. If the commissioner finds that the Premier violated the act, there's a wide range of penalties. He could recommend the Premier be reprimanded, fined, suspended, or in extreme cases, the commissioner could recommend that his seat become vacant.
All right, Caroline, thank you.
Thanks.
Caroline Bargout with the CBCI team. You can find out more in the story online at cbc.ca/Manitoba. And with more headlines, here's Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, as the federal election kicks off, polls suggest in Manitoba, the Liberals could hold on to their existing seats and even present a challenge in seats held by the NDP, whose support has plummeted. A probe research poll conducted on behalf of the Winnipeg Free Press says support for the NDP in Manitoba is in the 9% range, while Liberal support has rocketed up to 44% in this province. The Canada-U.S. trade war is pushing the brakes on a Winnipeg retiree's dream car. Pat Fletcher bought a 1968 Dodge Charger from a U.S. broker, but when he tried to bring it across the border, he was charged $46,000 in tariffs. We'll hear his story in our next local news at 8:30.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Let's get to quick traffic with Chloe Friesen.
Hello, yeah, I've got a couple calls here about a stall on northbound Osborne, just at Broadway. It's in the right-hand turn lane right in front of the bus stop there. It is causing traffic to get quite backed up. Again, that's northbound Osborne at Broadway in your right-hand curb or turn lane there. So do avoid that if you can. If you see anything else out there, 204-788-3093.
-9 in Winnipeg. Today's high today's high 3 degrees. We're going to be above zero, and we'll have lots of sunshine in Winnipeg. Still ahead after 8 o'clock on the show. And so we're off to the polls on April 28th. 14 ridings here in Manitoba. Prime Minister Mark Carney has called the federal election. CBC reporter Bartley Kivas is going to join us to give us an insight and overview of what the political landscape looks like in some detail in our province. And we're going to hear what you've already talked about on the streets of Morden. Chloe actually was out talking to people there. What do they care about as we pose that question when it comes to the upcoming federal election? If you want to weigh in the meantime, check us out on Facebook or call us 788-3205. It's all still ahead. World Report's next, though, at 8.
The new play from the award-winning Canadian actor and playwright Anushree Roy follows 9 women and girls through one night during the partition of India in 1947. Anushree will tell you about how her own family stories shaped this play and what the history books often leave out.
Survival stories are every day, ordinary people surviving extraordinary events.
Q with Tom Power, this morning at 10:30 in Newfoundland, and on CBC Listen, or wherever you get your podcasts. The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current.
I'm Mark Kelly, and we're off. After much anticipation, the federal election period is finally here, and Canadians have big choices ahead. Our national affairs panel is here to talk through where we stand. That's coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. It is election season, Canada. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh boarding a bus for Montreal yesterday evening. His pitch to voters: the NDP fought for pharmacare, dental care, and they will fight for Canada too. Bloc Québécois leader Yves-François Blanchet is warning people in his province it's a bad idea to vote based on what they believe the U.S. will do.
I believe that in any instance, under any circumstance, one should never vote because of fear.
Green Party co-leader Jonathan Pedneau is starting his campaign in Montreal, while Liberal leader Mark Carney is campaigning in Newfoundland. He began his campaign there yesterday, and he criticized the Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, who is making an aggressive play for Liberal votes. As Tom Barry reports, Carney also got an earful from protesting fish harvesters.
Our majority government prime minister to come, Mark Carney.
Day one of the campaign, and Liberals like Fisheries Minister Joanne Thompson are sounding confident. The party has seen a remarkable turnaround since Justin Trudeau stepped down, Mark Carney took over, and Donald Trump started talking about making Canada America's 51st state.
Who is ready to stand up for Canada with me?
In his first rally of the campaign, Liberal leader Mark Carney spoke repeatedly about the threat to Canada coming from the U.S.
They want our country. Never. They can't have it.
Carney took aim as well at Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, a man he calls the worst person at the worst time. But as Carney delivered his speech, police were keeping a close eye on dozens of crab fishers protesting outside.
When we heard that the Prime Minister was going to be here, then we felt we had no other choice but to bring our message here.
Dwan Street of the Fish Food and Allied Workers Union says protesters are angry about cuts to snow crab quotas and want change. Carney acknowledged the protesters in his address and says he's ready to listen.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you.
Carney and the Liberals hopeful their newfound confidence can carry on and not fade over the course of the campaign. Tom Perry, CBC News, St. John's.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is starting his day with a promise to cut taxes. He says if he is elected, the average Canadian will see their taxes go down by 15%. Poilievre is in the Greater Toronto area. He is trying to make inroads in a region that has supported the Liberals in past elections. But as Kate McKenna reports, the Conservative rally there last night was packed.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre's campaign kickoff included a rally in North York, packed to the brim with eager voters.
Look at these incredible, hardworking, patriotic people. With people like these, we can overcome any obstacle. We can bring home the country we knew and love. We can stand up to the Americans and put Canada first.
The line to enter the rally extended outside and snaked around the venue. Party staff couldn't let everyone in. The room hit maximum capacity. Some people were turned away and given free T-shirts.
Well, I mean, we'll see. Maybe some folks will leave.
Barrie resident Stan Ronan stood outside hoping to get a glimpse of Poilievre. He says he supports the Conservatives because he believes Poilievre will bring down the cost of living and tighten immigration controls.
It's been 9 years of nightmare and upheaval on all fronts, and this is the fella that will reinstate the Canada we know and love.
The rally was held in the Toronto area. The region has been a bastion of Liberal support, but Conservatives want to make gains. They found success last year when they turned a red Toronto seat blue in a by-election for the first time in 30 years. Poilievre will be in Brampton today, hoping to keep the momentum going. Kate McKenna, CBC News, Toronto.
The first Black Republican woman to be elected to the U.S. Congress has died. Mia Love, the daughter of Haitian immigrants, entered politics in 2003 as a city councilor in Saratoga Springs, Utah. She later became mayor. In 2014, she would win a House seat and make history. She later lost her seat to a Democrat. Love had been outspoken about her battle with brain cancer. She died yesterday at the age of 49. U.S. negotiators are meeting with Russian officials today in Saudi Arabia. They are trying to reach an agreement on a partial ceasefire in Ukraine. Ukrainian and U.S. officials met yesterday in Riyadh. The talks are being described as constructive, but Ukrainian MP Oleksandr Merzhenko told the BBC he is not so optimistic.
Everything depends on Putin, and he's not interested in ceasefire or peace, and he is a major hurdle on the way to ceasefire. Ukraine has agreed unconditionally to Mr. Trump's ceasefire proposal. Russia, Putin has rejected it, and that's why I don't have high expectations.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says this latest meeting between U.S. and Ukrainian negotiators was more technical. They are looking at details like off-limit targets, including energy infrastructure. Police in India are investigating a popular comedian for defamation after he did some biting political stand-up. That is Kunal Kamra, taunting the second highest elected leader of the Maharashtra state. Eknath Shinde is a close ally of the Indian Prime Minister. His party complained after the comedian posted that skit mocking him on Instagram. And party workers ransacked the comedy club where it was performed. The chief of the state is demanding Kamra apologize. South Korea's acting prime minister has been reinstated. A constitutional court has overturned the impeachment of Han Duck-soo. This is the latest twist in South Korea's ongoing political disorder. The country is still waiting for a separate court ruling on the impeachment of President Yoon Suk-yeol. Yoon was impeached over his imposition of martial law in December. Freelance reporter Frank Smith has more from Seoul.
Judges for South Korea's Constitutional Court ruled 7-1 against the impeachment motion of Prime Minister Han Duck-soo in Seoul. They ruled the accusations against him were neither illegal nor serious enough to warrant his removal from office. Following the ruling, Han thanked the court for what he described as a wise decision. We all share the same wish for the country to develop and prosper, he says. Han assumed the role of acting president in December following an impeachment vote against President Yoon Suk-yeol. But he was later impeached himself after he was accused of delaying the ruling on Yoon by refusing to appoint judges to the Constitutional Court. A verdict on President Yoon's impeachment is expected later this week. Hundreds of thousands took to the streets of Seoul over the weekend, frustrated over the dragged-out case. Today's verdict may give the president's supporters hope he might also be reinstated. Meanwhile, Han has vowed to safeguard South Korea against a global trade war. The country is bracing for potential effects of threatened tariffs by U.S. President Donald Trump, but must overcome political turmoil at home first. Frank Smith for CBC News, Seoul.
The Canadian Chamber of Commerce puts St. John, New Brunswick at the top of the list as the most tariff-vulnerable city in the country. Their report looks at the risk and impact U.S. tariffs may have on St. John's biggest sectors, including oil. Kayla Hounsell reports.
On the production line is Cracked Canoe beer from Moosehead Breweries, the largest and oldest independent brewery in Canada.
Welcome to our brew house.
Chief Financial Officer Patrick Oland says Moosehead exports 20% of its beer to the U.S., but an even bigger concern, tariffs on aluminum. His company buys 100 million cans a year.
So once the tariffs went into place, the price of aluminum jumped by about 15%.
St. John sends 96.3% of its exports to the U.S., largely forestry products, seafood, and oil, home to the largest oil refinery in the country. Irving Oil can process more than 320,000 barrels of crude a day, with the vast majority exported south of the border. And that's the biggest reason the Canadian Chamber of Commerce has determined St. John is more tariff vulnerable than any other Canadian city.
It's interesting times, as they say.
Mayor Donna Reardon says being a tariff hotspot is informing how she's thinking about the federal election.
I'm watching for strategies. I'm watching for leadership. I want to know that there is a concrete vision.
And while there's been a focus on diversifying, industry experts say there aren't necessarily readily available alternatives for energy products, leaving those in this most vulnerable city still wondering what comes next as the trade war rages on. Kayla Hounsell, CBC News, St. John.
And that is World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
We're going to get some sun in Winnipeg today, and our temperature right now is sitting at -8 downtown. That's where we're sitting, too. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is live from our CBC studios on Portage Ave, Information Radio. On CBC, 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and on YouTube. This half hour on the program, and so we're off to vote. Manitoba, April 28th with the rest of the country. As candidates vie for your vote, what do you hope they know about your life here in our province? We asked folks in Morden for their perspective, so stay tuned. We're going to hear that right away. And then we're going to follow with some analysis from the CBC's Bartley Kivas, who is going to be live in studio with us. We're going to hear more about what this means in Manitoba potentially. So what is our current political landscape heading into this election? What do those 14 ridings look like? Bartley will run down all of it for us. Stay with us. All right, Heather Wells is here with other details on other stories. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, a farmer near Eli worries issues for Western producers are going to be lost in this federal election campaign. Alexander Bersch says his biggest issue is the tariffs put on Canadian canola by China in response to Canadian tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles. He says farmers are paying attention. Manitoba's premier has been accused of breaking conflict of interest laws. The premier and his family flew on a plane chartered by the Winnipeg Blue Bombers to the 2023 and 2024 Grey Cup games. Manitoba's Conflict of Interest Act says an MLA must not accept travel on a non-commercial chartered or private aircraft unless it's approved by the Ethics Commissioner. We're going to hear from the Premier's spokesperson coming up in our next local news at 8:30.
All right, thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
Let's update what's going on in the weather here. So just briefly for temperatures around the province. First, -8, I mentioned in Winnipeg, we're partly cloudy. Thompson's mostly cloudy right now, and you're sitting right around -11. And over in Brandon, it's misty, and it is also -11 degrees in Brandon this morning. As I was mentioning off the top of the clock here, mainly sunny and a high of 3 degrees for Winnipeg. Brandon, sun and cloud, high 1. Thompson, few flurries this morning and a high of 0. Chloe Friesen is in with traffic, and then actually is going to kick off our first half hour for election coverage here. So first to the commute, what's up?
Yeah, good morning. We're going to start in the Paw. Highway 10 or Fisher Avenue in the Paw from 4th Street west to 5th Street west is now closed. This is due to sewer repair. So there's a detour in effect. The closure won't last very long. The road will reopen at 4 o'clock p.m. today. So if you're in the Paw, do look out for that. And then here in Winnipeg, northbound Osborne approaching Broadway. There's a stall blocking your northbound curb lane. Keep left to pass. Delays are building on northbound Osborne. If there's anything else going on out there that you think your fellow commuters should know about, let us know. Give us a call, 204-788-3093.
So on Facebook this morning, we've posted right when we got in this morning around 5, what you're thinking about, what your fears are, what keeps you up at night, and what your issues are heading into the election. So kind of digging into the worries and the hopes that you have as Manitobans. So people are writing about the economy, the debt, women's rights, the relationship with the United States, and really it's all over the map. This is a significant election for so many reasons, and you were recently asking people about it as well.
Right, yeah. Party leaders are campaigning to Canadians from coast to coast to coast, and here on the prairies, I hit the streets of Morden in southern Manitoba to ask folks what issues are most important to them as we head into a federal election. I first spoke with Tammy Hendricks.
I don't know what party I explained to someone, I'm kind of neutral. I don't consider myself conservative or real liberal. I just want people to be happy. I want religion to stay out of this. I want people to be human and nice to each other again. That's what I want.
What's keeping you up at night these days?
The daily threats of our southern neighbors and not really knowing what's going on in the world.
Related to that, what do you think that either politicians or even media outlets are missing when it comes to getting the rural Manitoba perspective?
There's so many good things about this area. Like, we have a magnificent hospital that I just wish more healthcare people would come down here and go, this is a life, we want to live here, we want to raise our families. Because
So retaining doctors is something you care about?
Oh, yes. I don't have a family doctor. My husband doesn't have a family doctor.
Brenda Rock.
What matters to you right now?
Everything. I don't know. I think we need to get back to basics. The world's gotten a little crazy and out of hand.
What do you mean by basics?
I mean, start believing in God again, and I don't know, all the craziness that's kind of become what's important is really not the important part.
How has your family and your life here in this area kind of shaped your political beliefs and what you care about?
Personally, I liked our town when it was a town, and now it's become a city, and it's getting too big. It's too much immigration here, or we don't have the infrastructure to put up with that much immigration, so we need to slow that down and let Canada catch up, because we don't have hospitals or housing or childcare or schools for everything that's going on here. I think they're just losing sight of everything that's important. Like, they're trying to take people like us, our guns away and stuff, which is crazy because the only people who have guns left are the criminals. And that's not good. And I don't know, I just want to feel in a safe community. I know I used to walk at night not thinking anything of it, and I don't do that anymore. I don't trust the world anymore. It's gotten too crazy for me.
What will you be looking for and watching for as we head into a federal election in terms of a politician that will win your vote?
I don't know if there is a politician that can win my vote, but they need to start caring about Canada. You know, just like we've been here all our lives, struggling and working hard, and our tax dollars are getting wasted on a lot of programs that are ridiculous.
Bruce Schufelt. I grew up in a small town west of here, and community is huge value for Canadians and for my community here, and for, I think, even for large cities. And I think we need to create a sense of community and a sense of purpose, and I think we need to all be working together for each other.
Are you hearing that message from politicians these days?
Not overly, but I'm hopeful. So
I'm Dave Stobie.
As we head into an election, what keeps you up at night?
Well, from a selfish perspective, my wife and I have a kid in the rainbow community, and we're afraid of what that might mean. I have another kid who lives in Texas, who is quite a bit of a right-leaning person, and that's very stressful in discussions about things, eh? I have another kid who's married to an Indigenous fellow, a really fine guy, and I worry about potential backlash because Indigenous people have suffered for so many things.
What would you want to see from politicians at a federal level that would make you feel safer about the future for you and your family?
Well, I wish we could de-escalate this need to black and white things. I think we need to work on important things like the economy of this very community, which is terribly threatened, you know. If we can't sell windows and motorhomes and steel, we're really up the creek here in Morden, eh? And that affects everybody.
So that was CBC's Chloe Friesen in conversation with some of the people on the streets of Morden, Manitoba. You might know that Communities in Focus was in the Morden-Winkler area last week. We had some live shows there. And so the election call's been made. April 28th, we go to the polls. Mark Carney, the Prime Minister, yesterday asking the Governor-General to dissolve Parliament. The election campaign kicking off as well, barely a week after Carney was sworn in as Prime Minister. And according to CBC's poll tracker, the Liberals are in a dead heat with the Conservatives and the popular vote across Canada. And then you might have been hearing on the news, there's this probe research poll conducted on behalf of the Winnipeg Free Press. It shows the same dynamic here in Manitoba. But what does this mean riding to riding in this province? Let's have a look. CBC reporter Bartley Kivas joins us now in studio. Good morning, Bartley.
Good morning.
So off we go. Let's start sort of with the wider picture. How is this change for Manitoba since former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced his resignation in January?
Okay, so early January, which politically was 700,000 years ago.
Right.
Basically,
that's a stat that we can verify.
We can verify. Yeah, I mean, if you recall, because it wouldn't be hard, it wasn't long ago, the Liberals were basically dead in the water, looking at a potentially historic defeat for the party. And then Trump was inaugurated, made those tariff threats very real, and started talking about the 51st state for Canada becoming that over and over again, and the Liberals started climbing, and they've kept climbing. And as you just mentioned, 44% versus 42% for the Conservatives, with the NDP at 9% here in this province, and that's a historic low. Mary Agnes Welch is a partner at Probe Research, conducted the poll. Here's what she had to say.
It's one of the most confounding things, I think, in federal politics. Things started with a little bit of this happy warrior kind of vibe and has been able to do absolutely nothing to capitalize on that over the last 3 years. And I think is seen as much too closely linked to Trudeau, and any of the good work that's come from this Plan Confidence process has not benefited the NDP. They're seen as really not even an option for most voters.
Now, Singh, of course, is Jagmeet Singh, the leader of the New Democratic Party nationally. This phenomenon is interesting in Manitoba. So we start this election with the Conservatives holding 7 seats here, the Liberals with 4, and the NDP with 3. And when numbers get really, really low, the potential is even for popular or well-known existing MPs to be threatened. I take this back. you remember the 2011 federal election. The NDP came in second there, but they basically, under Jack Layton, ran the table in Quebec. 59 NDP MPs elected, including a lot of people who were placeholders.
Big orange wave, yep.
Yeah, big orange wave. And basically, everybody who was a member of the McGill NDP club had a seat to themselves, was an MP. And of course, the famous story of the bartender from Ottawa who became a fantastic respected MLA or MP, excuse me. Now, this wave phenomenon can overtake things. Now, I spoke to Eric Grenier. He's a polling analyst behind the RIT.ca. He also runs CBC's poll tracker.
The NDP has just been tanking in the polls to an extent that they really need to start worrying about maybe even official party status, which is 12 seats. They only squeaked by in Elmwood-Transcona. It was a by-election. But if those patterns hold at all, and the NDP continues to drop, then they might be in danger there. And you can't take for granted that Nikki Ashton in the north or even Leah Gazan in Winnipeg Centre would be safe if their numbers completely collapse and the Liberals are able to pick it up.
So he just mentioned them pretty much, but tell us more about the three, the NDP ridings that are up for grabs. Is it all three?
Yep, all three. But let's start with Elmwood-Transcona. There was just a by-election there in September, and Leila Dance has only had that since September. She beat Colin Reynolds of the Conservatives. This is one of the few ridings in Canada where there's a NDP Conservative back and forth. And now Dance is on the hot seat here. This is probably the easiest pickup for the Conservatives if these polls hold. And I'm going to talk about those ifs a little bit later. Churchill, Kuwait, Nuke Aski, the Liberals don't have a candidate there. Nikki Ashton has been there for many terms. So on the face of it, you'd say, how could no candidate right now so far defeat Nikki Ashton? Again, waves can play a role here. And then there's Winnipeg Centre. Leah Gazan has been the MP here for 2 terms. She defeated Robert Falcon-Ouellette of the Liberals. And Leah Gazan really, when I spoke to her on Friday, brushed off the low polling numbers for the NDP.
The polls have never really reflected, the results of the riding. And regardless of what the polls say, I'm going to continue to work hard. I respect the residents of Winnipeg Centre. I respect the voters of Winnipeg Centre. I think they should expect nothing less from me than to work hard, and I'll be doing that as I've done before the election and during the election.
Gazan is up against Rahul Walia. He's a 23-year-old, a graduate of a political management course. He's worked in Ottawa for the Liberal Party for 3 MPs. And when he was nominated in December, it was an acclamation. It looked like this is a sacrificial lamb that's going to run against Leah Gazan and get toasted. And I spoke to Wally on Friday, and he really pushed back against the idea that he might have faced or would have faced more competition for that nomination if the Liberals were doing as well as they are now in the polls as they were back in December.
That may be, but I can tell you right off the bat that I'm putting in, day in and day out. For the last few months, we've been door knocking every single day, including myself. And at the doors, we're hearing that, people want change. And people want positive change, and they want to make sure that we're stopping whatever we can from the tariff threats from Donald Trump.
So what about the Liberal-held ridings? Let's go through those.
So the bellwether riding, Winnipeg South, the perfect bellwether. Every time, every election, the winning party has Winnipeg South. So right now, that belongs to Terry Duguid, now cabinet minister, and he's running against Conservative Janice Morley-Lecomte, the former PC MLA here in Manitoba. St. Boniface St. Vital looked like it was in trouble a couple of months ago for the Liberals, and it's still not a gimme for them to hold on to after the retirement of Dan Vandal. Jeanette Levac is running there, and the Conservative candidate there, Sholag Bula, who ran against Vandal last time. So a returning name, hopefully some familiarity for the Conservatives, making them feel, or at least more confident that they've got inroads there. Winnipeg South Centre, Ben Carr is running. In Winnipeg North, Kevin Lamoureux is running again. And both of those look to be safer, based on current polls today.
It's hard to know, though, right? This is why we're careful with our reporting. So, and what about the Conservative ridings? Let's run through all of these blue ridings.
So the ones around Winnipeg 2 months ago, I would have said the Conservatives don't have anything to worry about, but there's a bit more of a race now with Liberals up in the polls.
Okay.
So Winnipeg West, which used to be the multi-hyphenated riding, held by Marty Morantz, he is in a rematch, or a re-rematch, his third race against Doug Aelfson, the Liberal former MP. Morantz defeated Aelfson twice twice now, and Ailson has come back for more. Not quite Rocky IV, but Anyway, this is generally speaking incumbents hold, right? So the other one is Raquel Danko, other Winnipeg area conservative riding in Kildonan and St. Paul. Raquel Danko, strong MP, running against Thomas Nakins of Liberals, less of a name than Doug Ailson. And then you get into the rural Manitoba conservative ridings, which are very, very safe. The safest ridings, the least likely to change. Brandon Suris, yesterday Larry Maguire, the MP, announced on Instagram he wasn't going to run again. So the Conservatives will have to nominate another candidate there. Then you've got Brandon Leslie in Portage Lisgar, Dan Mazer in Riding Mountain, that's newly renamed, another former multi-hyphenated name, and James Bazan in Selkirk Interlake, Eastman, and Ted Falcon Provencher. None of these seats are expected to have any change. I mean, Portage Lisgar, the conservative margin is so immense that you could stack all the other parties up there several times with their votes and not come close. So,
Hal, I know you just sort of alluded to this. We're first full day of campaigning today, and polls are polls. But how likely is it for the polls to continue, just given that everything seems to be so close heading in?
Polls tend not to continue, and they're based on current. This is a snapshot. This is the thing about polls. People say, "Oh, those polls are wrong." No, a poll held in early March is usually extremely correct for early March. And right now, we are more than a month away from this election. Campaigns matter. You hear that phrase a lot of the times, but they do. They really do. Two pieces of history. A lot of people are familiar with this. I've mentioned this before on these shows, on your show and the afternoon show. 1984, John Turner, Prime Minister, takes over from Justin Trudeau, has the lead, calls an election, and gets trounced by Brian Mulroney's Progressive Conservatives. They get, those Progressive Conservatives, a record majority, 211 seats. 1993, Mulroney hands over the reins to Kim Campbell. She has the lead going in, and partly because of the advent of the Bloc Québécois and the Reform Party, the Progressive Conservatives get reduced to 2 seats and never quite recover. So these things can happen when changes like Trudeau handing over to Carney happen. Parties can get annihilated, but the biggest difference between 93 and 84 and now is there was no external threat to Canada at that point. Mm-hmm. That does not mean Pierre Poilievre cannot climb back up here. Also, another thing, just because things are in a dead heat
or
statistically.
Or that people won't feel that he's the right person to lead us through the threat. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
So dead heat statistically right now gives an advantage to the Liberals because their vote is more efficient. The Conservative vote is piled up more deeply in some of these Western Canadian ridings like Portage Lisgar. So the Conservatives generally speaking, need to be quite a bit ahead in the popular vote in order to win the seat count in Canada. That said, not necessarily, and campaigns really do matter. So everything I've said today could be completely irrelevant 5 weeks from now.
But right now it's relevant. Thank you for coming in. We appreciate you having me in studio this morning.
No problem.
All right.
My pleasure.
Engines started, Bartley Kivas. Bartley Kivas, reporter at CBC Manitoba. If you want to read more about, the analysis, Bartley's written some really good analysis riding by riding as well, so you can walk through it. cbc.ca/Manitoba, you can check it out. I want to mention Radio Noon's call-in. Don't miss it this afternoon between 12:30 and 1. Call-in portion every day and all the other local programming through the day. So Radio Noon is on noon to 1, of course, and then Up to Speed happens between 3 and 6 o'clock this afternoon. We've had a pretty decent morning commute here. Nothing major to announce, even heading into 8:30, and your CBC Winnipeg News is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg at 8:30. It's -8 right now, partly cloudy. We're going to see a mostly sunny Monday and get set to watch that snow disappear, a high today of 3. A democracy advocate says Manitoba's premier broke conflict of interest laws by flying to 2 Grey Cup games on a plane chartered by the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. CBC I-Team's Caroline Bargout reports.
Manitoba's Conflict of Interest Act says an MLA must not accept travel on a non-commercial chartered or private aircraft unless it's approved by the Ethics Commissioner. Records show that did not happen when Premier Wab Kinew took his wife, son, and his assistant to the 2023 Grey Cup on a plane chartered by the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. This may not seem like a big deal, but democracy advocate Duff Conacher says it is.
Not everyone has access to that plane, and so accepting the seat on the plane for himself and others is what causes the conflict.
The Premier's spokesperson says Canoe personally paid $8,000 for the flights, but the government paid for his meals and accommodation. The Ethics Commissioner can investigate the Premier's expenses, but only if an MLA files a complaint, which the Conservatives are considering doing. Caroline Bargout, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Well, day 2 of the federal election campaign has Liberal leader Mark Carney stopping in Gander, Newfoundland. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre will spend the day in seat-rich Greater Toronto, where NDP leader Jagmeet Singh will also be following an announcement in Montreal. As the federal election kicks off, polls suggest the Manitoba Liberals could hold on to their existing seats and even present a challenge in seats held by the NDP, whose support has plummeted. A Probe research poll conducted on behalf of the Winnipeg Free Press says support for the NDP in Manitoba is in the 9% range, while Liberal support has rocketed up to 44% in this province. Rahul Walia was acclaimed as the Liberal nominee for Winnipeg Centre in December when Liberal poll numbers were low.
The reason why I wanted to run is because this is my home riding, and I feel that I can make the biggest difference here. And so that's why I put my name to run, regardless of what the polls were saying at the time.
Winnipeg Centre has been NDP for 2 terms, held by Leah Gazan. In addition to Gazan, Green candidate Gary Gervais is also running in Winnipeg Centre. A farmer near Eli worries issues Western producers have will be lost in this federal election campaign. Alexander Bersch says his biggest issue is the tariffs put on Canadian canola by China. Those tariffs are in response to Canadian tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles. Bersch says it's putting the multi-billion-dollar canola industry at risk, and he says farmers are paying attention.
Probably almost everybody votes regardless every election, but I think this time around it's going to be more polarized because I feel like the West feels like it hasn't been heard for a long time.
Bersch would also like to see more investment in infrastructure to help producers get their goods to their customers. Experts say anti-Semitic graffiti in a Winnipeg terrorism-related case is on the lighter side of what MKY is known for. Last week, RCMP charged a 19-year-old after the initials MKY and swastikas were spray-painted all over buildings in Charleswood. MKY, which comes from the Russian for maniac murder cult, is a violent neo-Nazi hate group. Evan Balgord at the Canadian Anti-Hate Network says MKY is known for promoting violence.
These are people who deeply hate themselves, deeply hate others. They expose themselves to horrific images and videos that sort of desensitizes them to violence, and they share videos and that kind of propaganda within their networks.
Balgord says acts of vandalism are to gain clout and attention from other members who will quickly encourage worse activities. A man and a woman have died after their minivan crashed head-on with an SUV on a southeast Manitoba highway. It happened yesterday morning on Highway 12, just north of Zoda. RCMP say the northbound minivan was trying to pass a semi but crashed head-on with a southbound SUV. A 76-year-old man and 72-year-old woman in the minivan died at the scene. A 37-year-old man traveling with them was taken to hospital in serious condition. The 41-year-old man driving the SUV was taken to hospital in critical condition by Stars Air Ambulance. A Winnipeg retiree had to leave his car behind in North Dakota after being handed an unexpected bill. Pat Fletcher bought a 1968 Dodge Charger from a U.S. broker after saving for it for years. But when he tried to bring it into Manitoba March 15th, he was charged $46,000 in tariffs. Fletcher couldn't pay, so his car stayed in the U.S.
I haven't got that money, so what do I do? I'm in between a rock and a hard place. And, I don't want to put a lien against my house.
Cars manufactured more than 25 years ago are among the list of American products tariffed by Ottawa. Fletcher now hopes those levies can be lowered soon, but if the situation drags on, he says he may have to sell his dream car. You can find more news updated throughout the day. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
So thanks to our news department this morning, Heather Wells, Megan Ketcherson, and Jody Nicolo, as well as Leif Larson, who is the senior producer of audio at CBC Manitoba, as well as Nellie Gonzalez, who's the show's producer. Those two contributed to the program this morning, the morning show. Producer Donna Carrero, reporters Bartley Kivas and Caroline Bargoot, and associate producers Chidi Akuma and Kalkadam Mulageta. Our live team our live show team here in our control room, May McKillop, studio technician, YouTube director Kevin Nipatebo. Thank you, guys. And thanks to Chloe Friesen, who directed the show and has one more thing to say about the commute.
Northbound Osborne at Broadway, there is a stall in your right-hand lane that's just in front of the bus stop there, causing some delay. So do be prepared for some slow traffic on northbound Osborne.
All right, thanks, Chloe. In Winnipeg, we're going to leave you with mainly sunny skies today and a high of 3 degrees. And right now it is -9 over in Brandon. You'll head for a high of 1, sun and cloud, and Thompson, few flurries, and a high of 0. My name is Marcy Marcusa, and I'll talk to you again tomorrow right here on Information Radio on CBC. Take care. Have a good rest of your Monday.